Someone shouting asked the girl that it was she who had killed the previous His Majesty the Emperor. Putting a sword to her neck, she was asked again if she had killed the Emperor. The girl looked away from the man with the sword and clasped her hands together, thinking that it would finally be over for her. She used to be a simple office worker in South Korea. It would have continued like that without her soul being trapped in the body of a minor character in the novel. The main character's name is Bish, and she is the daughter of the Emelian family, and her childhood friend is Jade, a boy who escaped from the imperial palace. Bish covered for him and even took the blame for the murder of the previous emperor, for which she was executed. What happened shocked the young man who thought of her as his family. Because of this, darkness enveloped his heart and made him a tyrant. About the heroine in the novel, a couple of lines were laid out, which she was destined to recoup. The girl vaguely hoped that by playing out her role here, she would be able to return to reality. She was following the road of Bish's life. Today was finally the day of her return to the real world. It was the day of Bish's death, the day they would say goodbye. Suddenly, Jade appeared on his horse and shouted out Bish's name. He is the young man who didn't blink an eye when he took his father's life. Today is the last time the girl sees his face. Her death will be a shock to him, but he will continue to follow his destiny in this novel. However, the girl wants so badly for the ending of the book to be good, but she, alas, will never catch it again. Bish uttered aloud that yes, she was the one who killed the emperor. Jade yelled to the girl that enough is enough, and for the girl to just say no. Bish stood up and stated that she was the emperor's murderer. Jade fell to his knees and crying, asked the girl if she really wanted to leave him alone. He begged her not to do that, for it was his fault. The girl noted that he did not need to kneel. After all, he had ascended to the throne so that he could no longer bow his head to others. The girl mentally wished him to become a strong person and the backbone of his empire, to meet the protagonist and live happily, as well as to get rid of the curse that tormented him so much, to heal his heart wounds and live a glorious life such as the one described. The girl summarized that this was the end of her role, and she said goodbye to Jade. The girl's body was pierced with a sword. She remembered the day she first saw him as a child. The little girl had held out her hand to the boy, saying her name was Bish, and asked what his name was. At the time, she hadn't realized that for him to say his own name, and the last name given by his family, that she had turned her back on her child, and hadn't even deigned to think of something original, like opening old wounds. The girl remembered calling his name Jade, and every time she did, he would blot away the moisture that came to his eyes and look at her with big purple eyes. The girl recalls how her name was pronounced Jade by Bish in different years as she grew older. She thought she could easily let go of what they had in common. But when she realized how fleeting time was, it was no longer possible. She apologized to Jade. If she came back here again, she thought she would make the same choice. After all, this place is not her world. It belongs to Jade. As she was dying, Bish said that his sin would go with her, and that he could live happily ever after. As described in the novel, what happened turned her childhood friend into a tyrant. Someone called the girl's name. When she opened her eyes, she felt a familiar sensation. As she sat up on the bed in shock, she clutched her face, calling for her mummy. Jade stood nearby and called Bisha by name. The girl mentally wondered why he looked like a 10-year-old. She sincerely didn't understand why she was back in the past. The girl looked at herself in the mirror and remarked that this was to die for. Was everything that had happened really a nightmare? Her storyline had come to an end. The girl genuinely didn't understand why she had returned to her origins after her death. Perhaps she had fallen into a time loop. Sipping from her mug, she wondered what the hell had caused everything to go so wrong. Jade watched the girl carefully, wondering if he had been waiting for her to wake up. Already aloud, Bish asked Jade what he was doing here, how long he'd been waiting for her. Jade shared that duty and reached for the teapot. Bish awkwardly replied that he could have just woken her up. She wondered exactly how long Jade had waited after all. She tried to remember if she and he had been so close over the years. Jade put his hand on Bish's arm and stated that he had waited a very long time for her. Bish wondered if he was a child talking so calmly and kindly. Suddenly, Bish apologized to Jade because she was not feeling well today and would not be able to play with him, and then offered to play with him next time. Jade headed away from the room and told Bisha to rest. The girl didn't recall him being such a precocious boy. At 10 years old, Jade, like the rest of his peers, craved the warmth of love. Maybe that was why he had come to play with her. Now, however, she needed time to think things over. A maid appeared in the girl's bedroom. Noting that Miss was awake, Bish turns to Sophia, asking what day it is. In the next moment, we see Bish sitting at her desk, writing with a quill pen on paper. It was June 14th, the 519th year of the Empire's calendar. The girl had indeed travelled back to the time when Jade was 10 years old. He had arrived at their manor one cold December afternoon, so she was back in the moment 5 months after his appearance. She had dealt with that. However, she was completely clueless as to why exactly that had happened. She needed to put things in her head straight. For starters, she should note that her plan to return to the real world had safely failed. She clearly remembers how, when her soul was transported to the pages of the novel, someone said. Even rather, that phrase seemed to be imprinted in her memory. Secondary heroine Bish Emelian is living out her last moments. If the course of the narrative is similar to that intended in the original, she will be able to return to reality. That's why she followed the original plot and died to end it all. However, she ended up being transported to a different place than planned. It's just not a suggestion, but there's something wrong with her going back in time. The girl really resents it. I guess now she needs to liken everything here to the original. The title of the novel is The Holy Girl Who Re-Educated a Tyrant. Jade is a bastard who was turned away by his imperial family. He was the one who killed his father and took his place on the throne. His character lacked humanity. Disillusioned with his family, who wanted to use his son for their own purposes, the warmth and care he received from her, Bisha Emelian. It is understandable why, after such a good friend took his guilt and paid for it with her life, a solid darkness engulfed Jade's world. He waged indiscriminate wars and used the magic power that flowed in his imperial blood to destroy his enemies. However, not only magic was passed down through the generations, but also a curse. The curse was madness. Only massacres and wars were distractions. Jade was slowly going mad, but he had no thoughts or need to stop his madness. Each war brought new lands to the Empire. Just when Jade was beginning to think that only he could destroy it, he met the protagonist, Cecilia. She is a holy girl, in whose power it was to break the curse. Bisha suggests what happened next, more than obvious. Surely they, having gone through fire and water, happily lived together. Not knowing what will happen after Bisha's death drives her crazy. The boys were at a picnic. Jade handed Bisha a glass and told her to drink the milk. The girl sat down, no matter how much they thought about it, and yet she had died exactly as the original story should have. The girl was still wondering why the beginning of the story was different. Jade asked Bisha if she wanted a cookie. Jade had been coming to see her regularly for the past few days. Besides, he is so cordial to her, or rather takes care of her. She won't deny, however, the thought of ethics, of exploiting a child, a prince besides, visited her. But Jade even seemed happy to do her bidding. Suddenly, Bish decided to ask Jade if he was uncomfortable with her sitting on his neck. Jade replied that he was not. Bish sincerely didn't understand why he was so pretty again. She was starting to feel remorseful. The only thing that calms her down is the knowledge that he will be a tyrant in the future, and therefore just the same. Here it came to Bisha, should the young future tyrant be so kind. If you think about it that way, the original novel had said in plain text that Jade was a man who lacked humanity. However, right now, he's being overly polite and kind. Bish watched Jade wipe up the spilled tea himself and wondered why he was wiping it up himself. Was it because she was the only one who gave him warmth? Jade turned to Bisha and offered her lunch in the room. The girl clutched her dress and summarized that she had spoiled Jade. In the next moment, we see a moment where Bish asks in shock, "How come it's all shattered? Those things must have been very valuable." To follow the original, perhaps she needs to nurture Jade's tyrant tendencies from childhood. The only other option is to get tough. she'll start by trying to make their affectionate little boy angry. Bish smashed Jade's things, but the boy stared at them emotionlessly. The girl wondered if she was overreacting, and wondered aloud to Jade if he was angry. Bish didn't understand why the boy was silent. Maybe he was holding back, though whether he was angry at all. Suddenly Jade stated that it was Bish's own stuff. She remembered going through her things, and not realizing why she needed them, since she was an adult, decided to give them to Jade. They looked so familiar to her. She decided she wasn't going to take it in her head. She was just going to take it and scatter it around. Scattering toys was a common game among 10-year-olds. The girl wondered if maybe Jade didn't care that much about these things, since there was zero reaction from him. Jade called Bisha by name and took her hand, noting that she would hurt herself. The girl agreed because it was crystal. Bish wondered if he really cared if she hurt herself if she broke it. She should raise him to be a tyrant. As she sat down to help clean up, Bisha mentally turned to God Almighty, asking him why he had sent his angel here. The list of things that could piss off a 10-year-old is limited. For example, if he's an adult, you can slap him on the cheeks and scold him if he's cranky. But she's the same age as him. The girl remembered what kind of statements schoolchildren in the real world allow themselves to say to others. She couldn't do that, and then Bish concluded that she could forget about it. To speak ill of Jade's mum was an inhumane act, and should not even be considered. Since that's the case, she'll do what she would have done as a 10-year-old. Bish poured a bucket of water on Jade, and mentally told him to get angry. Afterward, the girl said out loud, confidently, that she had poured it on him on purpose. She mentally thought that he would definitely not stay calm now. However, Jade simply replied with an ouch. This puzzled Bish. What was next? Would he not say anything else? Bish grabbed Jade by the collar and pushed him against the wall, asking him why him. She ate all the delicious snacks in silence, slathered him with mud, pretending it was an accident. Bish questioned why he wasn't mad. Suddenly, Jade asked the girl if that was what she wanted. Bish replied that he's human. Anger needs to be vented. That's how you have to live. She mentally urged him to be angry, to have a war in the future, to take down the members of the Council of Ministers, and much, much more. Jade took the girl's hand and added that he wouldn't get mad at her. The girl didn't understand how, so would he never get mad at her? Jade replied that he could for one reason alone. The girl was curious to know what that reason was. However, Jade stated that it was a secret and patted the girl on the head. Bish stated that she was hopeless. She, who has lived 37 years, is being stroked on the head by a 10-year-old toddler. Jade seems to have taken her attempts to provoke him into anger over a childish prank, and either sees her as his little sister, or she acted amateurishly. He's not a kindly fool, just kindly, since there's only one fool in this situation. Obviously, the adult Jade is smart, but the fact that he was already a child when he matured is a big surprise. Bisha still has a lot unknown about their young hero. The girl ran over to Jade and called his name. Bish noted that he was so tiny, but his smile was already amazing. Everything was lit up around him. She asked Jade what he was reading. She noticed for herself that he was holding a book called The Russell Prince, and her words Jade confirmed. The Russell Prince is a story similar to the story of The Little Mermaid from the real world of Bishi. In it, a mermaid prince falls in love with a human princess, but achieving mutual love fails. When the princess gets into trouble, he saves her at the cost of his life. Bish didn't understand why Jade would read romance, and took away his book and said it wasn't for him. Running off with the book, she told him to wait. Looking through the shelves, she noticed a book called Happiness Starts with Little Things, but that wasn't it. Noticing the treatise The Sovereign on the shelves, Bish rejoiced. The book, Good Always Wins, flew by, but the book, The Devil's Leader Advances Quickly, was already pretty good. The politics of fear was the way to go, but the day of the serial killer made Bisha wonder if it was worth picking up. Giving the books to Jade, the girl told him to read them from today. Jade listed sovereignty, fear, murder, politics, and selfishness, then stated that he thought it was too early for him to read such things. Bish noted that she should have thought of that before she shoved them at him. Bish suggested to Jade that if he found them too complicated, They could read them when they were older. However, Jade stated that no, he liked them. Jade picked up the book, The Blood Sovereign Ruler of the Iron Hammer. Bish wondered if a child could be interested in such dark stories. Out loud, the girl asked if he really liked it. Jade replied that of course he liked them, because Bish had brought them to him. The girl sincerely didn't understand why little Jade loved her so much. However, the answer was obvious. She was his only friend and family. He follows her around like a schoolboy, but is it the other way around? She wondered if he saw her as younger than himself and was trying to protect her in every way possible. It occurred to Bisha that little Jade had loved her just as much in her previous life, before she'd come back. Even though she had been the first to lend him a helping hand, and had always been there for him, she had tried not to let him get attached to her. She would have to go back to her world after she died in this one. She told Jade, tomorrow, next season, next year, when we are adults, and these words hurt his heart, but did not make him callous, and he grew up kind. Looking at him, Bish thought he was cute, but in this life, she needs to go all out and mess him up good. Jade turned to Bish, saying that it was time for his fencing lesson. The girl was indignant as to why he was being so diligent, then turned to Jade, saying it was okay to skip class. If he skipped it once, it wouldn't be a big deal, right? Since Jade doesn't have any other friends besides her, she's going to be his really bad girlfriend. Bish suggested that he stay here and read and eat something nice. She's sure he'll say yes because he's always listened to what she says. And she's so cute when she's little that he can't refuse. Suddenly Louis, the butler, appeared beside them and turned to Miss Bish, asking her what he had just heard if the girl wanted Mr. Jade to go nowhere and sit here. Bish replied that it was so hot today, but Louise replied that it was cool outside. Bish confidently stated that reading was just as important as fencing, to which Louise replied that they could read at other times. The girl said indignantly that she was reading right now, but Louise replied that as far as he knew, she had an embroidery class. Jade noted that Bishu seemed to want to play with him and asked Louis to please move the books to his chambers. Jade stroked her head and told her to play another time because he had to go to class. She felt as if her self-esteem had been hurt by a boy who thought he was her older brother. Suddenly a maid burst into the room, addressing Miss Bish, saying that His Excellency the Marquis would be arriving shortly. Bichet asked if the maid was referring to her father, to which she replied that he was almost there and would have guests with him, whereupon she tried to remember the names of those gentlemen. Bish thought about it, and then it occurred to her that it was most likely Dupree and Benjamin, the reckless twins of the Earl Louichel's family, Benjamin Louichel's and Dupree Louichel's. They're Bish's maternal cousins. Mama Bichet's mother was the precious youngest daughter of Count Louichel's. A true beauty, she met the young Marquis, fell in love with him, and after receiving his blessing, they had a wedding. However, her already fragile body after the birth of Biche became even weaker, which led to a sudden death, not allowing her to have time to imprint in his eyes, growing up the image of his favourite daughter. Biche is an absolute replica of her mother, whose image can be seen in the portrait. A slight smile made her shine, and made her so adorable that lavish dresses and jewels were no longer necessary. Biche envisioned her mother as a girl who, more than anyone else, possessed true nobility and grace. The twin cousins on their mother's side often stay in their county for a month or two, to visit and see the capital and explore cultural innovations. Biche ran down the stairs, calling out to her father, then flew into his arms, saying she was so glad they had come. The father was overjoyed, remarking that times were going on and his daughter was still the same little girl. Unfortunately, the carriage of Biche's father, Fritz Emilian, is involved in an accident, and he is killed when Biche is 15 years old, just before the celebration of her coming-of-age ceremony. Her character rarely appears in the opening pages of the novel, so her so sudden separation from her father was a great shock to the girl. Had she known that her father would leave this world so soon, she would have behaved well, as a dutiful daughter should. One cannot even imagine the regrets that gnawed at her. Louise bowed to Father Biche, saying that he had done a great job. Fritz replied that for him it was rest, not labour, whereupon he turned to Jade and asked if he was doing well here. Jade smilingly replied that yes, that Fritz had changed his focus so quickly was understandable. For Bish's father, it was just another business trip for a month. She, on the other hand, met him after her return for the first time in years. Father Bish drew her attention to who had come to see them. The twin brothers entered the hall, one of whom remarked that a lot had changed in a year, while the other replied that everything was the same as before. Fritz happily asked his daughter if she would play with them. The girl could not believe that she would have to put up with those nasty devils again. Out loud, the girl replied that yes, she would certainly play with them, and that she was happy to see them. The brothers turned their attention to Jade, who was standing next to Bish. Sitting at the table during tea, Bish introduced Jade as her friend, who in turn said his name was Jade Mercian, and added that His Excellency Count Emilian was his guardian. Jade poured a cup of tea and handed it to Bish. Jade is the nephew of a distant relative of the Emilian family. However, everyone was told that his parents died in an accident, so Count Emilian took him under his guardianship, and of course the surname Mercian is a fabrication. Suddenly, one of the brothers stood up, saying that he had heard something from his parents' conversation. The other brother indignantly asked why he didn't remember any of that. The first of the brothers went on to say that the Count had picked up an orphan, no estate, no inheritance, only living as a freeloader, then questioned why he shouldn't be a servant. Bish stood up from the couch, telling him to watch his words. He certainly is shameless, for how dare he say such things in Jade's presence? She even wondered where he listened to the rules of decorum, if he was unable to keep his mouth shut when required. One of the brothers started strutting around the room, declaring that she was making such a point. Why should Bish freak out? The girl wondered if the jerk had treated Jade so arrogantly in the past. Bish looked at the calm Jade and thought that, as expected, not a single evil thought had arisen in Jade's mind. Another of the twin brothers, who was sitting on the couch, asked Jade why he wasn't pouring tea for him. Bish indignantly pointed out that Jade was the Emperor's son. He was a prince. The first of the brothers wondered if they'd gotten to know each other in the time they'd been together, or if the boy was now Bish's lapdog. Bish became angry and grabbed her brother by the collar and threw him to the ground, shouting who he thought he was, how he could ignore a man's presence head-on, who made him a redneck, such a bore. The boy was very indignant upon hearing about the redneck and called Bisha a wench. Bish shouted that she would teach him such a lesson in education. For the rest of his days he would thank her for getting off so lightly for such valuable knowledge, and called him a bloody rude man. Bish grabbed the other brother, asking her to stop, but the girl called him an idiot and screamed at him to let her go. Suddenly, Jade grabbed the other brother and pulled him away from Bish. Jade called out to the girl, saying he shouldn't get in her way, because if he was being kind, she should let his anger out instead. Or maybe he was suggesting that they leave the ratty kid alone. The girl noted that their conversation had veered off into some strange direction. Did Jade really mean that she didn't need to fight? He didn't say a word after that. Bish decided to clarify aloud whether Jade meant that he'd asked her not to fight for him. Jade replied that he didn't mean anything else either. Suddenly, Dupree started yelling, but Bish didn't understand why he was pretending, since she wasn't touching him. She assumed it was on purpose, but then decided it was just an accident. Jade looked at Dupree and stepped on his arm, apologizing, saying it was an accident. But Bish realized it wasn't unintentional at all. He had intentionally stepped on his hand. She was sure she saw Jade's foot move gently from left to right, stepping on Dupree, if their angelic fighter for world peace could do such a thing. Jade decided to ask Bisha if something was wrong. However, the girl just smiled back. When you lose your balance, you can stagger and step in the wrong place by mistake. There can't be any other explanation after all. Jade is not a capricious child. Jade asked Bish if she would raise Benjamin, at which point Bish brought up the other brother. Dupree shouted to Bish that he wouldn't forget that to her. The girl responded by clarifying what he would do to her. Jade stated for both of them to stop. Bish pointed at Dupree and Benjamin, saying that they twins had better be kick-ass, because if she ever heard them talking nonsense about Jade again, she'd slaughter them like piglets, honest to God. Marquis Fritz noted that his daughter had become very eccentric in his absence. She had really done a lot of things in the meantime, skipped classes, tormented Jade, and made a lot of messes. She said aloud that her curiosity had gotten the better of her. Dupree said sharply that she had recently beaten them, to which Biche thought her brother was a brainless kid. If they got into the conversation again, she'd rat them out for bullying Jade, because she had a sense of justice too. Biche's father pointed out that the twin brothers are growing up together and they fight with each other. And Biche is the only child in the family, and she has a bit of self-confidence, so they should understand her. Anyway, his daughter has become very cheerful, just a sight to behold, or her father was already worried when he left for the estate. By the way, she remembers the first time she was here. She was confused because the place was new to her, so you can understand her lack of socialization and awkwardness with the family and staff, but in 5 years she had grown fond of the heroine's father. Biche asked how things were going at Emelian Manor and whether the residents were doing well. Fritz replied that luckily there were no problems, and then he remembered something and turned to Dupree and Benjamin, asking them if they'd met Jade yet. Biche cut in and said that of course they had decided to be friends. With a look, she ordered the twin brothers to nod their heads and not to say anything. Father Biche noted that Jade was his distant nephew and ward, so he would like the twin brothers to accept him as their family member. The boys replied that of course they would get along. Biche mentally noted that the boys were hypocritical brats who didn't even have the courage to speak up in front of adults. Biche's father noted that the fencing teacher had said that Jade had already mastered all the basic moves, that he was a gifted boy, and that he had asked Jade if he could have a famous teacher from the night squad teach him. After all, if Jade wanted, Marquis Fritz could help with that. Biche noted that she didn't realise Jade was so talented. Jade will tell the Marquis that she doesn't need to, since he isn't that interested in sword arts, unless Fritz insists. Father Biche asked what Jade himself wanted to study, and asked him to tell him, not to be shy. Jade asked Marquis Emelian to find him a magic teacher. In the past, the first emperor had defeated the Black Dragon, and through the magical power of his heart had raised an empire called Taranto. Although magic was passed down from worship to generation, along with a curse, it had become a symbol of imperial power. Since Jade didn't possess it, his family simply turned their backs on him. Although his mother's low origin and the family's own predicament probably played a key role in the matter, Biche wondered if with such a background, he still wanted to learn magic. Fritz asked Jade if he had a teacher in mind. Jade replied confidently that he wanted to study with His Majesty the Archduke Cartmel. Everyone at the table was shocked to hear Jade talk about the Archduke. There is an explanation for their confusion and fright. The fact is that Archduke Cartmel is the current emperor's younger brother and Jade's uncle. Of all the freedom-loving people, he is at the top of the list in the empire or even the entire world. Most importantly, however, Cartmel is a notorious nutcase, a madman, a mentally unhealthy person, and coincidentally an ardent follower of magic. There is a curse running through the veins of the imperial family, and since the current emperor, all of his family members have stopped using it, because there is no point in using force in a time of peace, and no one wants to go crazy. However, Archduke Cartmel is an exception. He can use magic without losing his mind. In the end, he did not become a madman, but he was known as a party animal and a weirdo. Fritz asked again about Archduke Cartmel, and Jade said yes, if possible. Biche mentally noted that of course it wasn't possible. She wondered if it would be possible to get this man to come to them and become the little boy's teacher, because he was a real mystery, and no one in the empire even knew if the Archduke was still alive. Biche's father replied that he certainly wanted to help, but he wasn't sure if he could get in touch. Biche supported her father and asked Jade if they should find another teacher. Jade replied that no, they didn't need another one. He would like to study with His Majesty Duke Cartmel. Marquis Fritz exhaled and replied that was fine. He would try to track him down. Sometimes the girl felt as if both she and her father were under Jade's influence. But whatever the case, she's sure her father doesn't want to disappoint a child whose heart has been scarred by his own family. Unless Biche is mistaken, her first time here, Jade's request could not be honoured, and he never got the chance to take magic lessons. Bish suggested that perhaps it was at this point that they departed from the original. Marquis Fritz turned to his daughter and asked why the carp fountain in the garden had been destroyed. The girl realised that she could not tell that she had hit her head against it in a past life, or that Jade had hurt the back of her head against it, so it was decided to get rid of the dangerous thing. To her father, Bish replied that she just didn't like fish, and so that the carp could calm down, she sent it to heaven, because it had done enough work for its time. Mentally, the girl stated that she should have come up with an adequate excuse beforehand. Jade joined in their dialogue, noting that he thought Bish seemed to have a lot of energy. So why didn't she fence with Jade? Marcus was surprised, replying that his daughter had said she couldn't stand that sort of thing. Bish stood up abruptly from her chair, stating that she would give it a try. It wasn't like that last time, but living the same life twice was too boring, and now she would take up everything she had missed then. Unexpectedly, the girl said that in return she would like Dupree and Benjamin to tutor them while they were staying here. The twin brothers were dumbfounded to hear this. Fritz signed all the documents and said it was ready. Louise noted that the Marquis had been working hard for a few days, but Fritz replied that he had been working hard, then asked if Bish and Jade were getting along well with the twins. Lucius recalled a situation a few days earlier, when he had approached Miss Bish, saying that they had been told to fence, and they had been hitting Mr. Benjamin and Mr. Dupree, and they were still bruised from long ago, and also reminded that a wooden sword was not a club. Bish said that next time she would either stab them or cut them, which angered Louis very much, for how can you say such a thing? To Father Bish, Louis replied that he thought they were all right, for Miss Bish was the one who had brought together the unexpected appearance of Mr. Jade and the cousins who came to visit every season. Outside the window they saw and heard fireworks. Louis remarked that it seemed to be her pranks, to which the Marquis replied that he did not think so. Bisi told one of the brothers to light them, but eventually called him a coward and said she would do it herself and let them stand behind her. She in no way expected to see fireworks similar to modern-day fireworks in a fantasy world. Admiring the fireworks, Bish noted that she was happy. It would be a lie to say that despair did not overwhelm her upon her return. But meeting Dupree, Benjamin and Jade is a big deal, so she wants to have fun before that time comes. Bish turned her attention to Jade, since he's looking at her and not at the salute. Bish smiled and asked him if the fireworks were really beautiful, to which Jade replied that they were beautiful and unforgettable. The teacher was telling them about the founding of their empire, and at that moment, Bish remembered Jade saying that the fireworks were beautiful and unforgettable. The teacher noticed this and turned to Mrs. Bish to see if she was listening. Bish replied that Louis was telling how His Majesty Alexis, the first emperor, had defeated the black dragon Taranto, and then raised an empire named after the dragon whose magic had made it possible. Louise noted that she was listening intently after all, but really, Bish was just living this life twice, so she had already learned all the lessons in her time and was now bored out of her mind. The book in front of her told the legend of the founding of the Taranto Empire. In the world of the novel, The Holy Girl Who Re-Educated the Tyrant, that she is currently in, the emperor did not hatch from an egg like in other fantasy stories. He did, however, name the empire after a dragon. Legends are inherently creative and sacred, which the author should be aware of, but why does the girl feel like she could have come up with something more interesting? Bish turned to her teacher, asking that if the emperor's powers were enough to defeat the dragon, they would be enough to create an empire, wouldn't they? In her opinion, it would be easier not to bother with it like that. The teacher responded to the girl's words that there was logic in what she said, and the girl realized at this point that the author hadn't made up the details of the story, and that was expected. The teacher turned to Mr. Jade, clarifying if he had any questions, to which the boy asked how the first emperor died. The teacher apologized, and Bish thought about the fact that the foundation legend was inspiring, and Jade ended up being interested in the emperor's death. The girl speculated that the book she had chosen might have influenced his mind. She should be happy about this outcome, because she wanted Jade to grow up to be a tyrant, but she felt sad. The teacher began to answer Jade's question, saying that it was known that the first emperor left the world 50 years after the beginning of his reign. But how exactly, even the teacher doesn't know. Jade clarified the point that the emperor lived more than 50 years, and summarized that he lasted a long time. Bish noticed that Jade had said long rather than lived, and suggested that it was probably to emphasize the effect of the curse on the imperial family. Jade turned his attention to Bisha and added that rulers often don't live long. The common people are unaware of the curse's existence. The emperor believes that outsiders do not need to know about his family's weaknesses. The truth is kept a closely guarded secret, so Crown Prince Jade, who did not possess magic and was abandoned by his parents at an early age, simply could not know of the curse's existence until the moment he mastered it in the future. The teacher announced that class was over for the day. Bish exhaled and declared she realized just now that the teacher was quite handsome. His facial features were sculpted, his angular glasses emphasized his intelligence, and his golden hair barely touched his shoulders. He was a handsome man, but she hadn't noticed it in her first life. She'd been so busy getting settled in that new place that she hadn't had time to look at him. Jade asked about handsome, to which Bish replied that yes, Teacher Rowan was a very handsome blonde. Jade asked if the girl liked blonde hair, and she replied that she'd been attracted to his hair rather than his colour. Jade asked if Bishy liked his hair done up, to which she said she liked the way it fell to his shoulders, but no, his face was prettier than his hair. Jade clarified about the face, to which the girl confidently replied that it was pretty though. The boy decided to ask seriously if Bisha liked his teacher. The boy decided to ask her seriously if she liked Bisha, and she thought about it, because it was an ambiguous question, for if it was a question of appearance and character, then yes, but if it was a question of liking him as a man, then no. She also should not forget that she was only 10 years old, and then she said out loud to Jade that of course she liked him, because she liked handsome people. She shocked Jade with her answer and wondered why he had such a reaction. Jade started muttering something to himself, and Bish wondered what he was doing. She couldn't hear what he was saying. Jade stated that it was nothing and offered to go. Suddenly the boy stopped, and Bish saw that he was looking at a portrait of her mother. It was definitely not the first time he'd seen her, but she wondered what was on his mind, so she decided to ask him what he was looking at so intently, if she was pretty. Jade grinned and replied that yes, she was beautiful, to which Bish replied that he had a good lip and asked him to tell her what his ideal type of man was. At this point, she mentally noted that even 10-year-olds have preferences. Jade replied that his ideal type of person was someone like a sparkler, with blonde hair and shining eyes. Bish remarked that he had the right mix, and then noted what he'd said about blonde hair and sparkling eyes. Putting her hand on Jade's shoulder, Bish told her friend that his love was unfulfilled, because her mum was her dad's soulmate. These words made Jade laugh heartily. Bish mentally urged him to look at Jade. He was about to burst out laughing. When he stopped laughing, Jade replied that he was actually looking at the person he missed. Bish assumed that Jade's words meant that he missed his mother, and her eyes filled with tears. Jade wiped at Bish's wet eyes, saying that he didn't know what she was thinking, but it certainly wasn't that, and added that he and she would meet again someday. Bish wondered if Jade's mum was dead, or if he meant a reunion with her in heaven, since children are full of enthusiasm. Bish decided to support him and agreed that yes, they would meet again someday. But for now, let him keep his spirits up. Jade thought he should thank her for her response, and then Bish cheerfully called him to brunch. Already at brunch, Bish decided to share with Jade that she had been doing some careful thinking. Jade looked at Bish and wondered what she was talking about. The girl was indignant at his tone, and for some reason there was suspicion in his eyes. Very soon Jade would meet the protagonist of the novel, a holy maiden with black hair, except that his ideal was far from the image of a holy maiden, which might have been one of the reasons why the plot deviated from the original, so Bisha needed to brainwash Jade properly since he was a child. Out loud, the girl stated that she thinks blonde people have bad character. If his ideal type is Bisha's mum, a frail and blonde girl, and yet Louise is exactly the same, he has grey hair. That's why he's so mean. Mentally, Bish is sure he'll find her words ridiculous because she's the one who came up with them. Jade conceived and shared that he thought Luis was the most generous man in the world, to which Bish indignantly replied that he was mistaken about him. Jade looked at Bish carefully and added that, looking at her, he was beginning to grasp the logic of her words. The girl honestly didn't understand how her appearance made her nonsense more logical. Jade clarified what Bish was even saying that to. Bishay replied that she thought he would like a girl with dark, or better, black hair, who was not from an aristocratic family, but from a clergyman's family, gentle and soft-hearted. Bish is sure that he will be happy only if he takes such a person as that as a spouse. The girl mentally praised herself, because their main character is a saintly maiden with black hair, so the foundation is laid, because only when you meet a saintly maiden, you will know love, and the rest is just a small matter. Jade asked the report that if that's the case, then Bish herself will marry a man with black hair. Bish was surprised at his question. Why was he even asking, since if she could get back to her world, Korea was the most likely place for such an outcome? Bish thought for a moment and replied to Jade that she would marry a man with good character and black hair. Jade repeated her words about good character and black hair and decided to ask if he would be a clergyman by profession. Bish replied confidently that she would not marry someone like that, for she feared the punishment of heaven, but that she would marry someone who would be a good match for her. Jade emphasized the perfect match, an uncomplicated type. The girl replied that he didn't understand. Finding the right person for you is incredibly difficult, and this is not the time to teach a child about life. As she sat back down on the couch, Bish noted that her preference wasn't important. What mattered was whether Jade understood what Bish had told him. Jade replied that he probably did, which pleased Bishi. If possible, she would constantly brainwash him and make the main character his ideal type of girl, building up the right worldview just in time for puberty to begin. Suddenly, someone knocked on the guy's door, and it turned out to be the twin brothers. Bish said, "Here come the bullies who skipped history class." Dupree replied indignantly that they had already gone over all the topics at the manor. Bish cheerfully clarified whether she could then tell Louis and her father about it. Jade asked the twin brothers why they had come. Dupree and Benjamin said they were going to see the capital tomorrow, and asked Bish and Jade if they wanted to go with them. The next moment, we see a carriage rushing by in which Bish asks the boys what they want there. Dupree replies that they're just going to see what they're selling at the bazaar and the new bell tower near the temple. Bish didn't understand what the bell tower was at first, but then she remembered that it had just been erected at the time and was huge. In the future, Jade wipes it to dust. In the story, he doesn't get along with the temple, and one day decides to commit a crazy act, leaving no stone unturned. Bish noted as she looked at this innocent child of Jade's and wondered how he would become a tyrant who destroyed his own religion. The carriage swayed violently, the bumpy roads not even a marquis's carriage could handle. And why in the world would there be magic in this world? Jade asked Bisha if she was okay, to which she said she was, and mentally wondered if no one had ever thought of inventing a flying carriage. Although the use of magic is expensive here, it would be irrational to use it to protect the scooter. By design, mages are rare in this world. Sorcery is not a power that will be used left and right. Using one's own powers drains a mage psychologically, and the shorter his lifespan, the more powerful the ability. Such realities have led magic to decline. There are only a few mages left, such as members of the imperial family who have possessed it since birth, and Crown Prince Jade, who has been deprived of his powers. The boys noticed that they seemed to be pulling up. In the bazaar, the guys noticed a person who looked like a mage. Benjamin puzzledly asks why such a valuable person is giving a shock in a place like this. Bish assumes it's a performance to celebrate the completion of the bell tower. The twin brothers shared that it was the first time they had seen magic. Bish yanked them to stop them from acting like rednecks, whereupon she heard Jade chuckle and asked him if he wasn't impressed. Jade replied that he was, however. His facial expression said otherwise. He was calm, most likely then that he would eventually awaken his powers. Jade decided to ask Bisha if she liked magic. The girl wanted to answer that, of course, but hesitated, because Jade, whose life would be connected to magic, would be in danger because of it, so she couldn't answer without thinking. Bish replied confidently that she didn't like magic at all. She was just curious, but nothing more. Bish looked around at the other ladies in the bazaar and called out to Jade and asked him if she looked inconspicuous. Jade didn't quite understand her question, and Bish clarified that she meant clothes. She didn't get to go to the capital very often, so maybe she should have dressed up. Jade declared to Bish that she was the prettiest. She assumed he was lying to avoid hurting her feelings, and noted that there were vendors nearby, so maybe she could buy a new outfit. Dupree, who was standing nearby, wondered if you drew stripes on a watermelon, would it become a pumpkin? Bish mentally called him a fool, because the correct thing to say was, paint stripes on a pumpkin. The next moment, Benjamin drew her attention to himself, telling her to look somewhere. A woman behind one of the counters greeted a group of 4 guys. Bish pointed to one of the things and asked Jade if it was really pretty. The boy said yes, but Bish noted that he had answered without thinking. Jade responded well to all the things the girl showed him, praising their appearance, and mentally asked to look at this little guy, because he is acting like an uncle that his wife dragged along on a shopping trip, and that's not the way to go. Bish said she wanted Jade to pick it out for him, and the boy was a little surprised, but almost immediately picked up the red bow tie and said he wanted this one. Bish mentally noted that he had a sense of taste, as she would see. Bish began to thank Jade, who was holding out a bag of money to the saleswoman. Bish asked in surprise if he had had his own money all along, but Jade replied that Louise had given it to him for expenses before they left. The boy then remembered that Louise had asked him not to tell Bish about it. Dupree and Bish gazed mesmerized at the tower bell, noting that that bell was pure gold. In the girl's real world, there are many religions, but here, people only recognize the goddess of love, Josis. Being the only deity, the religious structure of the empire is extremely powerful. The high priest of the Iosis temple has the rights to rank next to the emperor in importance. It is for this reason that Jade the Tyrant will have skirmishes with the temple. She also thought that if the children knew what she was thinking, they would think she was greedy, and she honestly didn't understand why such thoughts were creeping into her head. She also thought that if the children knew what she was thinking, they would think she was greedy, and she honestly didn't understand why such thoughts popped into her head. Maybe that was the reason the goddess had gotten angry with her and brought her back. Perhaps the words that Bish would return to reality when she went through the original plot of the novel had been said to her by the goddess. She still wonders whose voice she heard when her soul was transported to this world. Jade called out to Bish, which startled her a little. The boy asked her what she was thinking about. Bish replied that it was nothing, and mentally added that she had made up her own nonsense, which was absurd, because what goddess of love could not be? Jade grabbed the girl's hand and suggested she go to the temple soon. He shared that they said it was open to the public today. Bish wondered if it would be possible to see the goddess statue as well. The statue of the goddess is not normally on display, but in honor of the completion of the bell tower, residents of the empire will be able to come and see it for a few days. Legend has it that the goddess personally blessed the statue during its construction. Because of the many instances of people trying to touch it, or even steal it, it was decided to restrict access to it, the exception being a special holiday. Bisha touched the columns, noting that each one here is in the shape of a tree, and it's amazing. Dupree called the boys over, offering something to try. Jade clarifies if these are wish letters, to which Dupree replies that you have to write your goal on paper. The box, meanwhile, contains divine power, and when you open it after 5 children, it is said that what you wish for will come true. Biche shouted sharply that it was a trick of some kind, which attracted the attention of other people, and Dupree remarked that the girl was impertinent. Suddenly she put her hand on Dupree's shoulder, asking why he was being so rude, so everyone would think it was him who had yelled. The boy was clearly outraged as to why she was doing this to him, and Biche offered to let him try the thing out. Benjamin asked Jade what she would make, to which Jade replied that wouldn't it be more interesting to keep it a secret until they opened the box? Bish supported Jade and suggested that they should not reveal their wishes and check together in 5 years to see if what they wrote came true, All the guys agreed and started thinking hard about their wishes. Bish thought it was cute and wondered if she should write, "I want to go back to reality," or "Let Jade be the perfect villain." But she changed her mind because how would she explain it to the guys later? Bish wondered what her goal was now, and then she thought for a moment and wrote down her wish. The boys put their wishes in the box in Jade's hands. The boy asked if they were sure they wanted to entrust the box to him, to which the twins told him 100%. Bish also thought that Jade was the most trustworthy of the four of them, since Luis had given the money to him for a reason. The guys decided to head back, but before leaving, they decided to take one more look at the goddess. Bish noted that there were no fewer people, though they could understand it. It was an important event, and even the twin brothers had gotten into the spirit. Bish looked at Jade and was surprised. He was standing with his eyes closed, and she assumed he might be praying. She wondered if he believed in a goddess, a tyrant who would tear this place apart in the future. She wondered if she should make a wish too, for if there was a higher power here, it was obviously evil, playing with her and Jade's destinies. But if they were here, Bish decided to ask them to make things go as planned, and yes, to send her, the stranger, back to her world. When Jade opened his eyes, he saw a praying Bish. The guys were preparing a place for the box. Dupree shared that he thought it was enough and decided to clarify what would happen if they forgot where they buried it. Bish suggested putting up a signpost. Benjamin started to panic, and Jade said not to panic because they would find it. Benjamin shared that they had buried it, but they were still curious about what everyone had written. Bish stated confidently that she wasn't the least bit curious. The limit of dreams of 10-year-old twins is something like, "Let them give a lot of pocket money," or "I want excellent in all subjects." But what the protagonist of the novel wished, she is a little interested. Jade confidently suggested that surely in 5 years they would all open that box together. Bish sweetly pointed out that Jade was such a child. He was 10, after all. Bish wondered how fast those 5 years would fly by. Dupree stated that they were returning to the estate in a few days. She tried to remember how long it had been since the twin brothers had arrived, perhaps 2 weeks. Suddenly Jade held out his hand to her and suggested she go home. Bish realised that she had at some point, without realising it, become accustomed to the four of them hanging out together, and then concluded that time was like an arrow and 5 years would fly by. Bish invited the twin brothers to visit in the winter, to which they agreed. The maids load the carriage with things, and Bish and Benjamin watch a crying Dupree hug Jade. Jade asks Dupree not to cry, and he declares that he will miss him. Bish had decided to ask if Dupree would miss her, to which her brother gave her a tongue lashing. The girl was outraged, a shock to her, and she was actually his cousin. Dupree waved at Jade, telling him that they would see each other in the winter and to take it easy. Bish was very angry that Dupree hadn't said anything to her, and she said out loud that she wouldn't be sick either, while Jade tried to contain his laughter. Jade noted that Bish didn't look sad, but the girl said she didn't see why she should be sad, because they'd be coming back, and now that they'd gotten a taste of the capital, they'd be stopping by even more often. Jade hesitated, and Bish decided to ask him why, to which she got the answer that it seemed to him that parting did not cause her any special feelings. Bisha didn't understand what he was getting at, or why he was making her look soulless again. Bish replied confidently that she was not, but that she had a lot of feelings, and she was going to cry into her pillow tonight, but afterward, Jade said that was a lie. Bish thought to herself, I wonder if he's a mind reader. However, she shared with Jade that if he left her, she would cry so hard that the whole manor would be in tears. Jade clarified why he would leave her, after which he quickly walked up the stairs to Bisha and took her hand, telling her that she didn't have to worry about it. The girl didn't understand why he was angry, for such a quiet man could not be angry. Bish wondered if her words had hurt him so much. Jade motioned for Bisha to go quickly. She thought that making Jade angry would make him a tyrant, but seeing his angry face for the first time made her uneasy. As the night wore on, Jade sat on his bed, leaning back and thinking that it was too quiet and he couldn't sleep. He began to wonder if it was because the twins had left, or because of the nightmares he had at times. He remembered Bisha and her words, "If you leave me." But he immediately turned his head, pushing those thoughts away from him. He heard a sound at the window. There was Bish, digging out the wish box. She didn't care about the twins' wishes, but Jade's was a completely different matter. Perhaps there would be something in there that would influence the course of future events. Bish tried to open the box but failed and resented why it wouldn't open. Jade watched the girl and remarked how cute she was. Meanwhile, Bish was discovered by a maid and seriously asked Miss what she was doing here at such a late hour and what was wrong with her clothes. Bish replied to the maid not to misunderstand her, for she just wanted to eat potatoes. The maid asked if Miss Emelian was digging up potatoes, and then she was horrified and told Bish to look at her hands, for they were all dirty. Jade, who was watching and listening from his window, could hardly contain his laughter. The house fell into silence, and then in a moment it was filled with noise. Jade flopped down on the bed and continued to listen as Louise appeared, asking Mrs. Bisha what she was doing here and why she wasn't in bed yet. In such a good mood, Jade noted that he was sure to have good dreams tonight. 5 years passed quickly. Louise received a letter from Earl Luchel's estate, and this time it didn't arrive either. Suddenly, Jade appeared and approached Louise, wondering if there was a letter for Bish. He could give it to her. Louis looked at Jade and asked what was wrong, to which Jade replied that he had just realised how fast time was passing, for when he had first arrived, he had been about Louis's waist height. Jade noted that it had been a long time since then. Louis thought that was right. The boy who had followed his master and arrived at his mansion was already 15. 5 years is a long time, but on the other hand is like a pish. Jade knocked on Bish's room and informed her that a letter had arrived. His appearance pleased the girl. On the spring of Bish and Jade's 15th birthday, they were still together. The letter was from Dupree and Benjamin, saying that they wanted to visit for the first time in a long time, since it had been 3 years since their last visit. Bish asked Jade if it was really unbelievable that Dupree was studying theology. The twins came often to Emelian Manor during this time to visit in winter and summer, and when they turned 13, Dupree, to study theology, and Benjamin, to become a knight, entered the academies, which stopped their visits to the boys. Dupree used to be a real troublemaker, and Benjamin was modest. It feels as if she was just yesterday surprised by their career choice, wondering if it was supposed to be the other way around. Also, in those 5 years, her plan to make Jade a villain has successfully failed. She only succeeded in becoming his worst close friend. The problem is that the villain here is just her, and while their mild-mannered Jade, no matter how much she prodded for pranks, remained unlike her. His kindness was still conspicuous. She was living her life wrong. During lunch, Bish clarified if the twins would be coming in 2 days, to which Jade replied that maybe the day after tomorrow in the second half. The girl suggests that they must have grown up so much, to which Jade noted that they had too. Bish grimaced, noting that Jade only grows like that, while she barely grows, and she doesn't understand why at all. Since they eat the same food, her portions are even bigger, but only he grows. Jade clarified if it wasn't because of her picky eating, and reminded her that vegetables should be eaten too. At times like this, Bisha gets the impression that Jade is her big brother. It seems to her that compared to her attempts to make him a villain and a tyrant, his attempts to make her a goody-goody are more successful. Jade remembered something and turned to Bishai and reminded her that she had a lot of invitations to the debutante ball and that she would like to go. Bish remembered about debutantes and that as her age approached adulthood, she started getting invitations to the debutante ball. In most cases, if one's status is about the same as a marquis's daughter, entering the social circle starts fairly early, though more often than not, they have to organise the ball themselves. To Jade's question, Bish replied that she doesn't want to, and will go out after adulthood. She's sure that even Jade was uncomfortable attending the event, so why should she like it? The first time here she'd thought it was mandatory, but now she realised that the debut wasn't such a big deal. Bish summarised that it was torturous, and Jade emphasised that, and wondered if usually at that age, girls weren't already shining their faces at finding a spouse. Bish said that they usually did because of the frequency of girls getting married right after they came of age, but at about 15, they started attending balls to find a groom. She wondered if Jade was really going for her older brother's gender and why he was talking about her fiancé. Bish decided to ask if Jade wanted to go to the ball, if he wanted to start dating someone. Jade wondered why the conversation had shifted so abruptly to him. Talking to a girl made him smile. Bish said indignantly that she thought he was the one changing the subject, and then said they were past that and she didn't need to find a soulmate. Jade didn't understand what Bish was talking about, why she didn't need to. The girl asked what was wrong, and mentally added that she was going to die and return to reality soon anyway, so why the hell should she look for a spouse? Jade decided to emphasize that the girl liked men, which shocked Bisha, and she said it was nonsense. Jade started listing a handsome blonde Rowan, a handsome and immaculate priest, a handsome decadent guard, a salon worker who looked like a powerful man, and he was trying to remember more. Bishi mentally noted that okay, this wasn't bullshit. These were all names of handsome guys she was praising while genuinely resenting why there were so many handsome guys in this world. Out loud, Bisha replied to Jade that she just likes looking at them. Jade shared that it looked like Dupree and Benjamin had decided to come because they were looking forward to their coming out. Bish stated ominously that she knew the two of them had personal intentions, so that was the reason they had decided to come for the first time in 3 years. Jade summarized that if, in general, Bish wanted to go to the ball, she should be sure to tell him. Bish didn't understand why, to which Jade replied that they should go together. Bish decided to clarify if Jade was going to interfere with the issue of finding her hubby, to which Jade replied that he definitely wanted to interfere. Bish concluded that it looked like the guy still thought she was a little duckling. In the hallway, the boys spotted the Marquis of Amelan. Bish noticed that their father was in street clothes, so she asked him if he was going somewhere. His father replied that yes, he was having dinner with the family's patrons tonight, and then Bish realized why they hadn't set the table for his father. As the boys watched the Marquis leave, Bish decided to ask Jade if there was something he didn't like. Jade asked why he thought that, and Bish replied that he seemed a little down. Jade noted that he thought sometimes the girl was very observant. Bish tried to figure out if that was praise, but Jade tucked a strand of her hair behind her ears and added that sometimes her emotions were a little dulled. Bish thought he was being self-deprecating, so how could she even understand him, and said aloud that it was certainly not praise. Bish thought about the debutante ball, because Jade was about to meet her main character and have a fling with her, so why should he interfere with her love affairs? Since she's destined to die here anyway, it would be nice to have a little romance before returning to the real world. Bish summarized that it was a great idea and why she hadn't thought of it before. Jade turned to Bish and noted that she had stopped playing. The girl apologized and clarified where they'd left off. Jade assumed that questionable thoughts had entered the girl's head again, which angered the girl. Jade asked her not to think about anything. Based on his words, Bish concluded that he seemed to take her for a flighty puppy rather than a duckling. Louis ran toward the boys, addressing Miss Bish and Mr. Jade. Miss Bish asked if something was wrong. Louis wailed that it was finally, but the boys didn't understand him. The guests had arrived, even though the twins weren't due until tomorrow. Louis wasn't talking about them. He held out a letter and stated that it was for Mr. Jade. Bish thought it was a love letter and indignantly asked who it was from. Louise stated that she had misunderstood and the letter was sent by His Majesty Archduke Carpmel. The boys were surprised that he replied after 5 years. His Excellency the Marquis had been writing him letters every 3 months all this time. She wondered if the Archduke had been wandering around for 5 years and had only just returned home, and then she wondered aloud why the answer had come only now. Louis replied that he did not know the reason, but Jade replied that this time he had personally sent him a letter. Bish was surprised and decided to wonder what Jade had written in it. It turns out that his father had been tirelessly writing letters to the Archduke for the past 5 years to ask him to be Jade's magic teacher, but he had just ignored them, not even bothering to reply. Jade claimed that he had just written something that might interest him. Bisha was interested and asked to take a look, to which Jade simply summarized that the Archduke was coming. Louis and Bichy were shocked to find out if he was going to be Jade's mentor and really come to them. Jade added that the Archduke would be joining them by the end of the summer. Louis excitedly clarified whether Jade was sure of that. The Archduke had indeed written that he would be at your place by the end of this summer. So much for the unexpected. Biche doesn't know whether to be happy or frightened by this turn of events that didn't happen in her previous life. Her intuition tells her that this short line in a letter, arriving 5 years later, will soon bring a storm to their estate. A mistake by the imperial family, born without magic, to a woman of low birth, the bastard crown prince, Prince Jade. We watch the moment when the Marquis turned to the young prince and asked him if he wanted to go with him. Already in the carriage, Fritz said that upon his arrival at the manor, Jade could call him Marquis. From now on, his full name was Jade Mercian. The Marquis added that he was going to introduce the young prince to all of his pupils. Only the Marquis himself, his secretary Louis, and his daughter Biche know that Jade is the crown prince. Biche is Jade's 1-year-old, and the boy remembered their first meeting when Biche said her name and asked him. As an adult, Jade had only dreamed about it all, and since then he had met his 5th spring with Biche. Suddenly, something pricked Jade's heart. The next day, the twin brothers arrived at the Marquis's estate. Dupree was the first to fly to hug Jade, past Biche. The girl began to ask indignantly what they were fed, how they'd gotten so big, and if Dupree was invisible to her. Because of Dupree's tailing of Jade, Biche concluded that she should have beaten him more as a child. Benjamin smilingly pointed out that Biche hadn't changed, to which the girl replied that it wasn't her who hadn't changed, but that they had grown up too much. Biche herself turned that Benjamin had such a strong physique and suggested to everyone to look that it was their quiet Benjamin who had become a knight. It was the first time she had ever met such a thing in her long life, to which Dupree pointed out that she was only 15. Taking Benjamin's hand, Biche noted that his skin had gotten rougher and his muscles were so freaky, and then she summarized and suggested that Benjamin get a hug too. In her mind, she realized that their embrace would be much tighter than Dupree's and Benjamin's. Suddenly, Jade called out to her and tugged at her dress. The girl didn't understand why he did that, since she and Dupree were hugging, to which Jade replied that it was normal between boys. Biche didn't understand why he was so conservative. Was it normal for members of the imperial family, and summarized that Jade was a nerd. Biche stood on her toes to ask Benjamin to explain to her that Jade had been overprotective of her lately. He seemed to think he was her big brother. At that moment, Jade called out to Biche, and holding out her hand told her to go to her. The girl thought and decided that okay, they should go. Benjamin wondered if Biche didn't realize that Jade was taking care of her like a brother. Everyone in the manor knows that Jade is willing to go through fire and water for Biche, and how could they not notice, even though the two are still the same? Biche and Jade asked the twin brothers how life was for them at the academy, and asked them to tell them. The twins specified what exactly to tell them about, to which Biche asked about how their classes were going, which teachers they didn't like, which girls they were getting on with, that sort of thing. All 3 boys looked at Biche and questioned her about the phrase, getting it on. Biche mentally twitched herself that she had just said that, because there was no such slang in this world. Biche thought about explaining it to them, then told them that it's when the heart knock 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 knock, and everything blooms in the soul, kind of like the sweet love atmosphere floating around when a guy is around a girl. Dupree started laughing, which angered Biche, and she asked him what was so funny. The guy almost burst out laughing and replied that it was nothing, then added that Jade had said that Biche was gradually becoming more like a guy, and Dupree had just confirmed what he had said. Biche was shocked. They were arseholes, quietly discussing her in their letters. Biche threw a glance at Jade. He in turn decided to look away, whereupon Biche shouted, No, it's not like that." Biche decided to ask Dupree why he had decided to become a priest, to which he asked if he wasn't suited. The boys were smiling sweetly at each other at this point, and Biche added that there seemed to be a new religion in their empire, to which Dupree asked what kind of nonsense that was. The girl pointed out that isn't the force Dupree believes in Satan, he's a foreigner. Dupree was indignant. But the next moment he folded his arms and began to beg forgiveness from the almighty Mrs. Joseph. He began to ask her to show mercy and absolve him of his sins. He was clearly practicing patience with Biche, who looked at Dupree and realized that the study of theology had changed him, and she waited for him to boil like a kettle with anger. The girl recalls the four of them going to church, and Dupree then taking a very long and thoughtful look at the statue of the goddess. The guy who'd been rude at Jade's first meeting with him had at some point become his clingy friend. As he sipped his tea, Biche noted that he'd been trained with a wooden sword. Biche remembered her other twin brother and turned to Benjamin and asked him how he had discovered his talent for fencing. With a smile, Benjamin replied that he simply passed the qualification test. From his answer, Biche noted that her cousin's modesty was still with him. Looking at the boys, she began to note that Jade would become a tyrant in the not-too-distant future. Dupree had chosen the path of a priest, and Benjamin had great promise as an apprentice knight. Biche wondered if this was how the plot was supposed to go. As the boys were walking around the castle, Biche shared that it was the first time they had seen each other in such a long time, and she was excited, then asked the boys if they were excited. Benjamin replied that he was too, but Dupree wondered what the girl was talking about, since it had only been a short time. Biche ran her hand through Dupree's hair, noting that he was still insincere, and she could see that his cheeks were flushed. Jade appeared next to Biche and called her by name and took her hand, and the girl responded to his actions by asking, "What again? Can't you even stroke her head?" Dupree indignantly replied, "Is that what she calls stroking?" Benjamin replied that he thought he understood, but Biche didn't understand what it was, if he understood Jade's behaviour, but she wasn't a biting dog and only hit them. Dupree indignantly clarified if that meant it was okay to hit them. Benjamin wondered if he should go ahead and said aloud that Jade didn't behave that way with everyone, but only with her, because he was protecting her. Biche sincerely didn't understand what he meant that he was protecting. The girl stated that no, Jade treats her like she is a wolf that was let out of the cage. He is shaking with fear because he is afraid that she will make a mess. There was a silence, after which the twin brothers put their hands on Jade's shoulders. Benjamin remarked that Biche was still emotionless and asked Jade to be strong, and Dupree added that she might be his cousin, but he asked for his condolences. Biche asked indignantly what they were talking about. Dupree at this point decided to ask Biche when they were going to the ball. The girl replied by asking why he was wondering if he, a theologian, was allowed to go. Dupree calmly stated that priests are allowed to have families too. Romantic work in all its glory. Even priests are allowed to marry. Biche said that Dupree should finish the academy before thinking about marriage. Dupree replied indignantly that all their fellow students had been to the capital several times for debutante balls, and they were the only ones cowering, and Benjamin was always busy and didn't care at all. Dupree took his hand and asked Biche, and she, if she was interested in the debutante ball to the point of being creepy. The girl mentally wondered where he got the glint in his eyes. Did he really want to discern a kindred spirit in her? Jade took Biche's hand away from Dupree and said that the girl was saying that the debutante ball didn't interest her. Biche started to say that she didn't mean she wasn't interested in anything at all, but Jade interrupted her and said she wasn't interested in anything at all. The girl wondered why Jade was changing the endings of her statements, if he was pretending not to understand. Dupree grimaced, and Biche asked who he should go with now. Jade confidently replied that he should go alone, to which Biche replied in the negative. Jade added that Dupree was no longer a child, so how long would he need her escort? Biche thought about them being friends and needing to walk together. This is the first time she's seen Jade speak so sternly to Dupree, and they're actually children. When Biche started to speak, she was interrupted by Jade and told that they didn't have time to go over points. The girl was outraged. It pisses her off that Jade, for some reason, interrupts her at the most inopportune moment. Suddenly, the girl turned to Jade and suggested that they all go together. The boy was a little puzzled, and Biche replied that he had told her to let him know if she wanted to go to the ball, so she was offering to go together. Jade was clearly not very pleased, but still agreed to go to the prom together. The boys sat down to go through the letters together. While everyone approved most of the points, Jade said they didn't or that it was informal. Bish indignantly asked if he had read the invitations properly. Because you can't go here, you can't go there, then where can you go? Jade stated that all the seats were not up to par, and Bisha should not forget that she was the daughter of a marquis. The girl jumped up from the couch and asked what to do now. Jade pointed out that they could wait for the princess to open the ball. Bish clarified if he was talking about Melia, for as far as she knew there was only one princess in their empire, yet she was only 8. Jade smiled and stated that children grow up fast. Bish was outraged and mentally wondered if he should just say, "We're not going anywhere. We're just going to stay inside 4 walls." Irritated, Bish noted that if he continued to refuse everything, she would kick him out. Suddenly, Jade asked about having a debutante ball at the manor house, since Bisha was a lady of the Marquis family and had the right to open the ball. This had not occurred to Bisha, and she decided to ask Jade why he had decided to cooperate. He had only rejected everything before, and it was suspicious. Jade wondered if the girl didn't like him to do what she wanted. Bish thought about it because it was strange that Jade had changed his mind so suddenly, but if she started to pry, she wouldn't be able to go to the ball for the rest of her life. The girl decided to ask her twin brothers what they thought, and they said they were in favour of it. While talking to her father, the Marquis decided to clarify whether they really want to organise a debutante ball here at the manor. The Marquis looked at Louis, then added that he would tell Louis that his daughter could open the ball at their house. In her mind, the girl apologised to Louis. She had given him a lot of work. The happy father decided to ask if his daughter still needed Lady Emelian's help. Bish was silent, so her father called her name again, and she shook her head negatively. She walked over to her father and kissed him on the cheek and thanked him. As she left, the girl shared that Dupree would be very happy when she heard the news. The Marquis noted that his daughter was already truly Lady Emelian. Permission to hold the ball was easy to obtain, and in truth, they were not involved in the preparations, because Dupree, who was most anxious to go to the ball, said he would make the arrangements himself. In the end, however, everything fell on the shoulders of their trusty assistant Louis. Of all the duties, Louis entrusted one important one to Bisha. Bish asked Louis how many invitations to write, to which she replied that she hadn't written them all yet. The girl sadly remarked that he had only assigned her this yesterday, so how could she write to people on the list he had brought yesterday? Louise pointed out that judging by the fact that only 3 invitations were ready, he was beginning to doubt her seriousness about the event and added that Bish should finish before the end of the day. Bish indignantly inquired how he envisioned it. Louise clarified why she shouldn't ask Mr. on Jade for help. Bish told Jade to take it out, she wrote, and then he put it back in. The guy pointed out that she should have started with an explanation, to which the girl replied that he already knew what she meant. Jade wondered if the girl thought he had more work to do than she did. Bish asked why he was picking on her, since he was nimbler than her. 10 minutes pass, and Bish thinks about how she's going to die of boredom like this. Jade helps, but the guest list doesn't end. One of Carmel Jaresh Taran's names caught the girl's attention. It's so long. That's when she remembered that their empire is called Taranto. The surname Taranto and the name Carmel belonged to the crown prince, Jade's half-brother. The girl's hands were trembling. She didn't know if she had to invite him. It was unlikely that the crown prince would have time to attend the Marquis' daughter's ball, but if he wasn't invited at all, there might be a problem, if Jade and the crown prince met again. Bish was pulled from his thoughts by Jade. The girl spilled ink on the table and noted that she had gotten her hand dirty. Jade wiped her hand and decided to ask her what she was thinking about so much that she'd gone off the deep end. Bish hesitated at first, then shared that she didn't think it was worth sending that invitation. Jade looked toward the table, then with a slight smile, told Bisha to send it. Bish asked if he knew who it was addressed to which Jade suggested maybe his half-brother. The girl asked again if he minded, to which Jade replied that he didn't care, since his brother was nothing to him. Bish wondered how many childhood memories Jade had, if he didn't care because he didn't remember anything. She also thought about his family. Have they forgotten the wound they left on his heart by leaving Jade as a baby? Jade shared that, on second thought, he would like to see his half-brother again, since their last meeting had been quite fiery. Many questions popped into Bish's mind. Had they really been close enough for him to have those memories? If her memory serves her correctly, in the original, Jade killed his brother begging for mercy with a single sword blow. Bish once again clarified if she was sure to invite him, to which Jade replied that she was, and she shouldn't worry about him so much. The girl wondered why Dupree's proposal seemed so tempting to her, since it was completely crazy, and Bish noted to herself that she was being thoughtless. At first, she thought the debutante ball was a great opportunity for fun, and she wanted the twins and Jade to have a good experience. However, how did she get to be the organizer of all this? Although it was her own fault, there was no one else to blame. Jade called out to Bish and motioned for her to continue and have a chocolate chip cookie at the same time. The girl mentally noted that Jade could see through her sadness. The next morning, Bish ran through the corridors of the manor, calling for her twin brothers, Dupree and Benjamin. The maids alerted Lady Emelian that they had not been seen here. The girl wondered where the boys had been washed up at dawn. She found them and asked what they were doing here, for she had been looking for them. The guys replied that they were having fun and why a grown girl would walk into a guy's room without knocking. Bish had decided to ask him why he wasn't organising as promised, and while she and Jade were writing a huge pile of invitations, Dupree had gone to the capital to have fun. Bish noticed the magazines on the bed and asked the guys what they were looking at, to which Benjamin told her that she was just in time. They were looking at new tuxedos. Dupree added that he didn't hold out much hope for Bish's taste, of course, but decided to ask her for recommendations. Almost all the tuxedos were black, black, grey with black, black with blue, black with white. There seemed to be all black. But if she told Dupree that... Bish pointed to the white tuxedo. It looked neat and nice, so it would be 100% eye-catching. Jade pointed out that it was just a template, and it wasn't even coloured. Bish mentally cringed at how she'd gotten so lucky to pick the sketch. The twin brothers cried with laughter and told her to look at Bish, and Dupree thanked her. For now, he realised that any choice he made at random would be better than hers. Bish indignantly told him to settle down, and for Benjamin not to laugh either. Benjamin apologised, and remarked that it was just funny why she chose him in the first place. Bish angrily replied that yes, fine, she has a taste problem, but what's next? Let them choose and they'll go. Bish asked if old age had jogged her memory. It was time to open the wish box. The boys remarked that time had flown by so quickly. Bish noted that Dupree was a chump by nature, but how could Benjamin and Jade forget? Dupree indignantly asked what she had just said. However, he pointed out that Bish wasn't interested. So why the sudden excitement, since she had said it was a scam? Bish replied that she wasn't interested. She just remembered. Dupree pointed out that she remembered the exact date, to which Bish indignantly replied that it was pure chance. She had a good memory. Mentally, Biche noted that yes, she was dying to know the wish of her 10-year-old childhood friend, which could affect her fate in the future. So one night she decided to dig up the box, but Luis and Sophia noticed and gave her a good kicking, so how could she forget that? Biche turned her attention to Jade and asked him why he was smiling. He told her that it was nothing and that whatever she was thinking, he had just remembered it. The boys looked at Jade in puzzlement, barely containing their laughter. Dupree was digging a hole and turned to Biche and asked her if she was sure it was here. For some reason he didn't think it was. Biche hesitated, but replied that she was sure it was around here somewhere, oddly enough. Jade suggested that they try to poke around some more. Dupree wondered if they'd buried it that deep, to which Jade replied that maybe they had, and he had a happy look on his face. Then Biche turned her attention, asking if it was her. The boys noticed that the box had faded. Jade shared that if the box is no longer shiny, it's okay to open it, and it's a sign that 5 years have passed. Dupree encouraged the boys to open it. Biche pulled out a leaf and wondered whose wish it was, and read that it said, "Wish to be a knight." Dupree noted that it was definitely Benjamin's, to which Biche noted that it had come true, just like magic. The next piece of paper said, "I want to meet a dragon," and Biche assumed it was Jada or Dupree. Dupree embarrassedly replied that it was his. Biche noted that a dragon, such innocence, do they exist in reality? Dupree embarrassed and excitedly replied that he was very young. The next wish was for Biche, who wrote, "I want to grow up to be the most beautiful girl in the world." Dupree clarified that she had really lost her mind. Biche indignantly replied, "She can't have her own wishes. She was naive when she wrote that too." Dupree added that there are things a god can accomplish and things he can't. Biche clarified that her wish could not be granted, to which Dupree replied that only if she had a conscience. Biche didn't understand why she was so surprised. Is becoming the most beautiful in the world so much more implausible than meeting a dragon? Biche noted that her wish was ridiculous, but at the time, it seemed to her that it was exactly what a 10-year-old girl would have wanted. She wondered why they were reacting the way they were, and if Jade and Benjamin wouldn't contradict Dupree. Out loud, the girl noted that only Jade's wish remained. His wish was, "Please make the wishes of Biche, Dupree, and Benjamin come true." Biche noted mentally that it was a commendable wish for a 10-year-old. The boys noted that Jade was one cool one of them. Dupree hugged Jade in tears, to which Biche mentally called Dupree a dope. He reacted very differently than she had. In the end, 10-year-old Jade's wish didn't affect the original in any way. It was okay to not have a shovel date. Dupree noted that only Benjamin's wish eventually came true, to which Biche asked if hers hadn't. The guys looked silently at Biche, who eventually just congratulated Benjamin. Next came the day of the debutante ball. Everything was prepared for the ball as planned. Louis was so sensitive that it was hard to even talk to him in the hallway. Other estate workers were alerting him that it was time for the second band to arrive, and about the lights in the centre of the banquet hall. And Dupree and Benjamin were so busy shopping in the capital that they hardly ever appeared at the manor. One of the workers notified Mr. Dupree that the suit he had ordered for the reception had arrived, to which Dupree replied to put it there. Another employee asked Mr. Benjamin what they should do about the tie. Biche noted that they ended up with a loose one for sure Jade. Guy noted that Biche seemed more carefree than he was. Biche shared that Louise was in charge of everything, and he kept her away when she wanted to help with anything, then asked Jade if she didn't inspire confidence. Jade replied that Louise was very worried. Since there was no hostess in the house to manage her ball, he took the event very seriously. He asked her not to worry. If there was any flaw, it would definitely be corrected by others. Louise wants to see Biche happy. Biche thought about what she knew, Jade had correctly remarked. Since Biche's mum isn't here, Louise is trying to make sure that people don't feel the absence of his mistress. Biche smiled, noting that there was no way to dissuade him, and she was generally fine. Mentally, she noted that she thought it would be nice to feel the warmth she hadn't been able to feel last time due to stress. Suddenly, a maid appeared and turned to Miss and asked why she was still here, since it was time to clean up. Biche pointed out that there were still 5 hours to go. The maid nudged Miss Emelian, which was true. They were running out of time. They needed to get to the dressing room. Biche waved to Jade, saying they would see each other later. Just like that, their debutante ball began. Biche looked at the amount of stuff and asked what it was all about. The maid said they didn't know what colour would suit Biche today, so they brought all the dresses. Biche clarified if she had to try them all on. The maid pointed out that His Excellency Markic had picked them out for his daughter personally, so she would have to try them all on. She also noticed the jewellery and asked what kind of jewellery it was. The maid replied that it was jewellery that Madame Marquise had loved during her lifetime. Sophia and Ellie were ordered to start with the styling, and the girls immediately began to follow orders. They evaluated each option. Then it didn't suit Mrs. Style, then it added age, then it was too flashy, then the previous option was better. Or there was a suggestion for blue. It looked very neat. Miss Biche was asked to try on a great many dresses. One of the looks was liked by all the maids. They were delighted and commented that it was just right. Biche said that everyone did a good job, very beautiful, and thanked everyone. The girl turned to Sophia and decided to clarify if it was her imagination or if she had tried on the dress first. Sophia remained silent, and Bish thought dejectedly about the fact that 2 hours of her life and they ended up choosing the very first dress, and she had been twisting and turning for so long. She also thinks that's why, when shopping, you should buy what came to mind first. Sophia noted that Madame Marquise loved the necklace, and she thinks that Mama Biche would be happy to see how her daughter has grown and how beautiful she has become. Biche asked Sophia to stop. It was such a nice day. Why her? Sophia noted that Mistress was right. She was getting a little emotional. Biche recalled Jade saying that everyone was so worried because there was no mistress in the house to manage her ball, and Louise took the event very seriously. They all care about her very much, and so Biche decided to hug Sophia and asked her not to cry. Suddenly, Jade appeared in Biche's room and shared that he kept wondering what kind of goddess had appeared to them at the manor, if Biche had come down from heaven. The maids squealed, and Biche was embarrassed and asked him to stop. Well, he made a comment. Jade invited Biche to go. Biche turned to Jade a little awkwardly and remarked that he looked good today. A smile appeared on Jade's face, and he replied that he was pleased. There were a huge number of guests at the ball. One of the men thanked Biche for the invitation. It was Mr. Sormelin. Biche had forgotten his name, but he calmly reminded him himself. Biche exhaled and wondered aloud why she had opened the ball. Jade wondered if the girl was already tired. Biche honestly replied that yes, it was hard, and there would be no more events at their manor. She asked Jade why he hadn't talked her out of it, if he wanted her to suffer. Jade asked if that wasn't Dupree's question, to which Biche replied that he was nowhere to be found. And while she was agonizing, he was probably somewhere with the girls, giggling and enjoying the party. Biche hit the bullseye. That's exactly what Dupree was doing. Biche pulled Jade along with her and said that this was not going to work. She needed to take a break. Her throat was already hoarse. She decided to get some fresh air on the terrace. If anyone was looking for her, let Jade say that he didn't know where Biche was. On the terrace, Biche exhaled and called Dupree a traitor and said she would give him a hard time. The girl freed her feet from her shoes because the heels made her feet hurt a lot. If anyone should see her now, would they reproach her greatly? Suddenly, someone appeared from behind and startled Biche. A man appeared who looked familiar to the girl. He apologized and added that he should have introduced himself first. Biche remembered how she had been asked in her past life that she was the one who killed the previous emperor. She was asked if she had killed the emperor. The man introduced himself as Felix, the eldest son of the ducal family of Persia. Biche learned that he was the son of the Count of Persia who had carried out her execution. Here she was caught up with the enemy she couldn't avoid. It seems that mostly all her unfortunate encounters happen on the terrace. Even though it was his father and not him who carried out the execution, she still wasn't happy to see Felix. Mentally, the girl tried to remember where her shoes were. Felix said that the rumors about Biche's beauty were not false. The girl paid attention to his words. If she was rumored, if she said she was a hikikomori, he wouldn't understand. The girl thanked him for the compliment and mentally thought, okay, he complimented her. Thanks for that. In a past life, his father had put a hole in Biche's stomach, but it wasn't Felix's fault after all. If he had entered her terrace by mistake and saw that someone was already here, isn't it time to swap back in such a situation? Biche sweetly asked Felix if he wanted to go back to the lounge. Felix stated that if the girl didn't mind, he would like to be her conversation partner. Biche began to wonder what could not be so, why he was trying to seduce her. Biche was trying to figure out where her shoes were and where they had been washed off to, and was about to refuse Felix, who noticed that her hairpin was snagged and reached out to fix it. Jade suddenly appeared and asked what was wrong. Biche noted that he was just in the nick of time. Jade threw a cloak over her shoulders and asked Felix what business he was on. Felix inquired who Jade was. Biche watched them and suggested that if this was a battle of glances, were they playing staring games? She mentally asked them to keep quiet and say something. Biche realized there was no choice and introduced Jade to the eldest son of the Duke of Persia, Felix, and introduced her cousin, whose patron is her father, to the Lord Heir. She also added that his name was Jade Mercian and asked them to greet each other. Felix noted that Mercian seemed like a familiar last name to him. Jade clarified that if Felix's curiosity was satisfied, he could go on his way. Felix replied that he wasn't here to see Jade and asked if he could stop intruding on other people's conversations. Biche mentally questioned the heir if the heir thought he was being a bit frumpy. She mentally told him to leave for God's sake, because Jade had been guarding her better than any bodyguard lately, and if he continued to sneer, Jade would be all over him. Jade suddenly decided to ask if Felix's father, Count Persia, was doing okay. Felix grinned and asked if the aristocrats who lived in the suburbs were unfamiliar with the hierarchy of noble families. How dare Jade? Biche interjected and said that enough was enough. She apologized to the heir, but suggested that he watch his words. Felix was dumbfounded. Biche added that Jade may be just an unknown aristocrat from the suburbs to him, but he is like a brother to her, and like a son to her father, and he is a guest here, and she asks him to mind his manners. Felix turned to Lady Emilian and stated that she was making a mistake now. The girl smiled in response and stated that he was the one who almost made a mess, and she kept him out of it. She added mentally that she would spare him today, but she wouldn't expect him to forgive her even if he apologized 108 times. Jade wanted to argue about what they were talking about, but it was what was going on inside that drew her attention. Jade's half-brother, Camel Gerace Taranto, had arrived at the ball. Biche noted that the Crown Prince had indeed come to the ball. Felix turned away from Jade and Biche, heading towards the prince. At that moment, Biche noted that the apple didn't fall far from the tree, and Felix must have gone to lick the prince's arse. Biche turned to Jade and asked if he was okay. Jade didn't answer anything but asked the girl to sit down. Jade decided to help her put her shoes on. The girl asked indignantly what he was doing, to which the boy asked if he could see. The girl replied that she could see. That's why she was asking. She was embarrassed to death and would put the shoes on herself, then asked Jade to give them to her. Jade, sitting in front of her, stated that she was seriously not letting him take his eyes off her, even for a second. Biche clarified, "Didn't incidents like this happen quite often at balls?" The girl thought about the fact that Jade must have seen the Crown Prince as well. She mentally wondered why such a busy prick had rolled in here, how she could make sure they didn't cross paths now. Biche asked Jade if he was tired. If so, they could go rest. Jade noted that the thoughts in Biche's head were so obvious. This was her debutante ball. Had she forgotten the most important thing? He held out his hand and reminded her to dance. She had been practicing for a long time. Biche mentally pointed out that in the hall, outside the door to the terrace, was Jade's half-brother, who had abandoned him and never visited him. So why would a dance be important to him in this situation? Silly him. Biche put her hand in Jade's hand and declared that she was following him. People wondered who it was next to Lady Emilian. Never before had people seen such a handsome young man. Someone he reminded them of, black hair and amethyst eyes. Jade offered to see how much Biche's dancing skills had improved, after which he asked her permission to dance the first dance with her. Biche replied that, of course. The girl replied that it was expected, their eyes at different levels. Jade had gotten even taller, and she wondered if his hands had always been this big. Biche slipped and started to fall, but Jade caught her and noted that the girl was in the clouds. She mentally encouraged herself to keep her spirits up. The twin brothers watched, and Dupree told Benjamin to give him 500 gold pieces, because Jade had caught Biche when she almost fell. Benjamin suggested another run. Dupree asked his brother if they should go down and greet the Crown Prince, to which Benjamin replied that Dupree was right. Dupree turned his attention to the prince and wondered where he was looking so intently. His gaze aims across the ballroom toward Jade and Biche. Already after the dance, Jade gave Biche a glass and asked if she was tired. The girl asked indignantly if he'd been secretly learning to dance from her. They must have gone to the ball with Dupree. Jade retorted by asking what the hell that was all about. Suddenly someone turned to Lady Emilian. She begged him not to approach, wishing with all her soul that she hadn't run into him. Biche placed her glass on the table and greeted him, the light of the entire empire, His Highness the Crown Prince. The prince thanked the girl for the invitation. Biche bowed to him, saying that his visit to such a rundown place was an honour. Mentally, however, the girl thought it was not an honour, but an absurdity. Does the Crown Prince have no business at all why he showed up? Lady Emelian was embarrassed and wanted to introduce the person beside her, Jade. But the prince interrupted her and stated that he knew the man well. Bish remembered that the Crown Prince seemed to be 4 years older than Jade, so who knows if they might have gotten close before the moment of separation. And Jade's reaction is not that bad in her opinion. The prince clarified whether Jade was her cousin. Even someone as unintelligent and empty-headed as she realised that he denied being Jade's cousin. Bish called him a freak who has no conscience. Not only did he abandon his brother, but he hurt him. Bish aloud asked the Crown Prince to enjoy the evening. Bish was walking forward with Jade, following behind her, constantly calling her name, and at one point she all-d turned around. She mentally called Jade a chump, a stupid and stuffy guy. Out loud, she sharply declared that she wanted him to be emperor for sure. Jade noted, silently, that she was at it again. For 5 years she'd been telling Jade that he should become emperor, and her words had become a habit, necessary to brainwash him. But today she spoke in complete seriousness. Bish seriously told him to be emperor so that they would no longer dare to despise him, for he was not angry at all. Jade turned to Bish and said that he was not interested in ascending the throne at all. The girl didn't understand about something. He needs to become an emperor. And already mentally she added that he is also destined to meet the main character, break the curse and live happily. She started asking him questions why he doesn't want to which he replied that it's all because by getting this place, he will be deprived of much more. Bish sincerely didn't know what he was talking about, but she mentally suggested that maybe he was right, because the title of emperor takes away many valuable things, such as feelings, connections, time, and even his health. Jade asked the girl why she wants him to be emperor, why she wants him to be emperor, why she wants him blindly. Bisha was angered by the words, and she repeated his word blindly. Yes, she repeated it many times as if out of habit, but by no means blindly. Jade noted that she sounded like she was willing to sacrifice her own life for it. Bish clarified what he meant. Jade took her hand and told her that he didn't want to lose her, whatever the reason. Bish realised only now that everything she'd done up until now had gone wrong. 5 years after the rebirth, doubts about her true desires began to visit her for the first time. She began to see the people around her as her family, and yet Jade seemed to know something. Already in her bedroom, the girl remembered Jade's words about not wanting to lose her. At that moment, she indignantly asked what he was saying. At that moment, Louis suddenly appeared and announced that it was time for Miss to return, but she asked him to wait. She wondered if Jade really knew something, because he had made it sound like he knew she would die after he became emperor. She wondered if it was possible that Jade knew she was going to die, or if he was just worried. But she thought it was nonsense. Could he really see the future, and was magic involved? She remembered that Jade, however, would be awakening her powers for a while yet, and it wasn't even mentioned in the original novel. Bish that she really didn't know anything about him. The next morning, Sophia was sitting next to Bish, who noted that she was so tired from the preparations for the ball, she had no face on her. Bish stated that it was all right, for they had laboured and she had gotten sick. Sophia informed Benjamin, who had come in, that Miss had been running a fever for several days and continued to refuse to eat. The illness is not serious and the girl has a strong constitution, so she should recover very soon. The doctor examining Bish shared that he had heard that the first debutante ball had recently passed and wondered if anything had happened to her during her appointment. Bish didn't realise if it was night or early morning, how many days had even passed. Jade appeared next to her and began to use magic. Bish thought there was a whiff of freshness. Perhaps Sophia had opened a window. The next day, Bish got up from her bed and walked over to Louise. Toe asked the lady if she was better and could get out of bed. They were all very worried about her. The girl said that she was fine and apologised for the trouble she had caused them. She wondered why everyone was fussing and whose luggage was it standing. Louise shared that something had happened at the estate, so His Excellency the Marquis urgently needed to go there. Bish remembered and asked Louise what day and month it was and where her father was. Luis replied that today is July 5th, and His Excellency was in a hurry from was 10 minutes ago. Luis thought Marquez was very upset that he hadn't been able to see his daughter recover before he left. Bichet was horrified at how long she had been failing. Today is the very day her father was supposed to leave for the estate where magical creatures suddenly appeared, and he will die in a carriage accident. Her father is in danger. Her father's sudden trip when she was 15 years old. Biche stated madly, how could anyone forget such a thing? She remembered it already while preparing for the ball, so she promised to start mentally preparing herself in advance for the possibility that she might lose her father again at the end of the reception. But the sudden meeting with the Crown Prince, the doubts about Jade, and the days she'd been lying there without feeling had thrown her off balance. Luis asked the lady if she was all right, because she was pale and if she was not fully recovered, but the girl interrupted him and said, "Horse," but immediately remembered that she could not ride a horse. The original work, or rather, as the original says, if she does not interfere in anything and leaves everything as it is. If the father dies, and after him parted with his life and Biche herself, Jade will turn into a tyrant, meet a holy maiden, and everything in this world will be back to normal. This is not the girl's world. One day she will have to go home. That's what she used to think. Head remembered all the happy moments with the people around her. She realized that for a moment, she had come to love the current world completely and unconditionally. She decided she had to keep her father safe. She ran, shouting to Luis that she needed a carriage and that they should prepare the fastest carriage for her. Her father was in danger and she should tell him. Luis didn't understand what "in danger" meant. Biche said there was no time to explain. They had to hurry. Biche was going through a drawer. Suddenly, Dupree appeared in the day and asked how she was and what was that thing she was going through. The girl apologized to him and added that she didn't have time to talk. Dupree grabbed her arm and stopped her and told her to calm down and tell him what was wrong. Biche stated that her father was in danger and she had to save him. Dupree didn't understand what she meant. What danger? Bichet stated that it was a carriage incident. There was going to be an accident, so she needed to catch up with her father and prevent trouble. Dupree took Biche's bag and stated for them to go. Biche indignantly asked him what he was doing. She didn't have time. Dupree replied that she herself had said His Excellency was in danger, so they would go together. The girls clarified with him, "Doesn't he know what danger means? Let him stay home?" Dupree shared that he has sacred power, however it is weak, but what can help them? Biche agreed nonetheless, and they headed forward. They were notified that the defenders would be following them. They needed to stay out of harm's way. The Marquis first planned to look into the village of Rupelia, and if they went there, they could meet him. Louis asked them to be careful. Dupree decided to ask how the girl knew her father was in trouble. Bichet thought about it, because the situation was urgent, so she wrote to Louis and Dupree an event that must happen in the future. There was silence in the carriage, but it was broken by Dupree, who asked her sister if she had some sort of gift of foresight. Bichet replied briefly that she did, to which Dupree asked if Jade knew. She recalled his words about her being willing to sacrifice her own life to make him emperor. Biche replied that she wasn't sure. Well, someday she and he would discuss it. Dupree replied that it was fine and he would not bother her anymore. She could tell him later. The girl started to thank her brother, but she didn't have time to finish as their carriage was attacked. The girl wondered if the incident with the carriage and her father wasn't just an accident. Dupree shouted to her sister to be more careful. At that moment, Jade was reading a window book and noticed a flock of crows flying by. They came running to him and alerted the Lord that there was trouble. He clarified whether Biche had really gone to fetch her father. The boys who had attacked Dupree and Bichet's carriage cursed. "What's the matter? There's no one there." The other bandit asked if he was sure he was not mistaken. The bandit replied that he was sure the young brothers were there by their sister. However, a magic ball flew at the bandit and washed them away. Dupree said, "Lightning, wow, they are cousins with Biche. The kinship with her he can't even imagine." The boys are beside the body of the coachman, who was killed by arrows in the back. When the carriage overturned, the boys fell into the bushes, so they were unharmed. But if it had not been for Dupree, they would have been dead by now. Suddenly Dupree called her and reminded her that although he had said he would ask her about everything later, he would ask her one question now. He clarified that the girl had said that her father's carriage would just crash if she was in charge. Was that true? Dupree noticed that judging by the equipment and skills of these men who attacked them, they were not simple brigands but assassins, mercenaries. In a previous life, Bish's father had an accident when the carriage overturned. She clenched her fist and wondered if the original didn't say everything or if the plot events had changed. Perhaps it wasn't an accident, but a contract killing. Dupree pointed out to Bisha that he thought her father was over there. Not far away from them, smoke was coming from the woods. Bichet's father was alive with 2 guards, his carriage on fire. Suddenly the Marquis heard his daughter screaming and asking him to move farther away. The next moment, there is an explosion. The girl runs to her father and asks if he is okay. Dupree indignantly asked if she was crazy to throw fire magic balls in the middle of the forest. At that moment, they were overtaken by the defenders sent by Louise. They asked Mr. Marquis and Mrs. Bichet if they were unharmed. Besides her, the Marquis and Dupree, they have 6 men on their side. Meanwhile, the opponents have 4, so their chances of victory are high. However, 2 of the guards were immediately killed. Biche thought that it was an ambush if there were more enemies hiding nearby. The coachman who was driving them and the guards were killed. Dupree shouted to Biche to get a protective magic item. The girl thought about the fact that the people who had literally just been breathing were now dead. A dagger flew at Bisha, but her father blocked her, and it hit him in the shoulder blade. The girl believes it is all because of her attempts to go against the law of the original novel. Fate is punishing her. Bisha's father was lying on her lap, bleeding. The girl was shocked. Would it really end like this? She used to dream of dying in this world and coming back to reality. She thought of Jade, who she hadn't had time to talk to about many things. She mentally prayed that someone would help them. A protective barrier formed around the boys, shielding them from the arrows. Dupree asked puzzled what it was, to which Biche replied that it was magic. They didn't realize what was happening. The assassins were squirming in pain. It was all Jade's doing. Dupree noted that it was high-level defense magic. Bichet asked Jade how he got here. Jade put the Marquis and Dupree on his horse, telling the latter to ride straight ahead and see the village of Rupelia, where he would take the Marquis to be treated. Dupree set out on the road and Jade exhaled. He turned to the girl who at this point was wondering how he had ended up here, whether he knew about her father's accident beforehand or had simply followed her. He put his hand over her eyes and asked her to close her eyes for a couple seconds. She didn't understand why he already knew how to use magic, since the original magic only became available to him as an adult. The guys moved. Jade informed her that they were in the vicinity of the village. He couldn't travel any farther for the time being. Biche wanted to know how, but he interrupted her and asked her to let him be the first to ask a question. He assumed the girl had something to say about the situation, how she knew about it beforehand. Biche felt as if Jade had been given a glimpse of the future. Jade asked when it had started. Biche noted that he knew about the accident. He was already skillful at using magic. Jade seriously asked what Biche knew. She thought about talking to him, but in the end, she couldn't get a word out of her. She is just scared that her assumptions will turn out to be true. She is afraid. If she spoke, if she revealed the truth, what would Jade's reaction be? Jade noted that from the look on the girl's face, she knew everything. Then he asked if it was true that the same thing had happened to the girl. Biche didn't know what he meant. Jade stated that they had gone back in time, both him and her. He covered his face with his hand and wondered how he couldn't have guessed before. Biche was shocked, wondering if Jade, like her, had really gone back. Such a thing had never even occurred to her. It was only her soul that had moved into another person's body, so it was only herself that she thought was special here. Biche turned to Jade and asked him if he too had gone back in time. She mentally wondered what he'd been thinking, all those 5 years looking at her. He grabbed her by the shoulders and told her to tell him the reason she had given her life instead of his. He needs to know who ordered her to take on this role. Biche didn't understand what he meant. What role? He recalled that moments before her death she had said, "Here my role is over." Bish recalled that it happened right before the execution. Then right up until the moment of death, she couldn't find the right words. Jade shared that as he replayed what she had said to her hundreds, if not thousands of times in his head. He thought that she had not died of her own free will, that someone had forced her. The girl can't even believe it. It turns out that the reason everything turned into chaos was because she said the word roll. Bish replied to Jade that she wasn't forced. She realized that the bottom line was that she would only have to lie to him. Bish asked Jade how he had come back, but Jade asked her if she realized the reason for her return. In her mind, Bish replied that the reason was that she wasn't from this world, and her soul had moved into the body of the novel's heroine. It seemed to her that the reason was that the plot of the original novel had failed the first time. Jade shared that his magic is to turn back time, so time let go backwards because of him. Bish realized that it turns out she didn't come back because she couldn't let the plot of the novel flow with the flow of the original, but because of Jade. It turns out that he is the reason why the girl didn't return to reality. She realized that what was happening was unbelievable. Bish wondered if she should hate him. Strictly speaking, she couldn't get out of this world because the course of the narrative changed, because of the mistake of her words that changed everything. Jade had already become different, and the plot of the original split into small pieces. In other words, it means it's hopeless from here on out, and she believed that if she did it right the second time, she could get home to the real world. Bisha remembered Jade saying her names at different ages, and she wondered if she could hate him. Bish remembered that he had said he was interested in learning a lot about her. She tried to figure out at what point she should start explaining herself. Let her and Jade both go back in time. Would he believe that this world was inside a literary work, and when he found out that he was just a fictional character in a novel, how would he feel? Jade told her to forget it. She doesn't need to explain anything. The girl didn't understand how, why. Jade stated that it didn't make any sense anymore. The main thing was that from now on she wouldn't leave him anywhere, that she wouldn't disappear in front of his eyes again. Jade started crying and suddenly collapsed onto Bish's shoulder. The girl worriedly asked what was wrong with him, and then remembered the madness, the curse. Jade clarified if it was because of magic. Bish shouted that it wasn't, let him not use it anymore. The guy asked her to be quiet. His head was buzzing. He asked her until the people from their manor came. Don't move, hold out. He added that he wasn't in any pain. He would just close his eyes for a while. She didn't care anymore. If there was a god, she was begging him, begging for Jade not to be hurt. Louis turned to Mrs. Bish, who in turn asked how his father was. Louis smiled slightly, and the next moment Bissy was already in her father's chambers. The Marquis asked his daughter if she had hurt herself anywhere. Bichet replied that she was fine, and so was Dupree, which her father was glad to hear. However, the girl noted that Jade was the only one who had fallen off her feet. Marquis inquired as to how that had happened. The father decided to still ask his daughter how she found out about the accident. The girl clutched the hem of her dress and said she would tell him when Jade woke up. The father stroked his daughter's head and remarked that she must have been very frightened, so she should go rest, or she wouldn't have a face on. He clarified, she must have been up all night, right? Bichet replied that she was, and thought mentally how glad she was that her father was well. But at that moment, her father grabbed her cheek and said angrily that it had been reckless of her to follow his carriage, so he asked her not to do such dangerous things in the future, and that he had to scold Dupree. Biche noticed that it was the first time her father had scolded her, but afterward, her father thanked her for coming to his rescue. She mentally noted happily that she had succeeded in saving her father in this life. Benjamin asked Brother Dupree where Biche was. He replied that she was at the funeral of the knights and servants who had died in the attack on the carriage. Benjamin asked why. Since the Marquis still hadn't recovered, so the Biche went in his place. Dupree had noticed that she had changed, and Benjamin hadn't even realized it was possible, and neither had Dupree. It had been 4 days since the accident, and the boys wondered when Jade would come to her senses. Biche returned to Jade's room and immediately asked the twin brothers how Jade was doing. Dupree sadly replied that he wasn't awake yet and shook his head. She also asked what the priests were saying. The brothers told them that Jade had used too much magic, but no matter how much they explained, the priests still didn't believe them. Bish thought that it was understandable. After all, the current mages were no longer the ones who would be revered as in the past. The magic passed down from generation to generation has waned and lost its adherents, so nowadays most wizards only use magic for tricks. However, Jade, being the protagonist, is naturally not one of them. Even though magic did not appear at an early age, Jade has the most outstanding magic power among the blood descendants of the imperial family. He has used attack magic, defense magic, teleportation magic, and even time-fixing magic. Dupree turned to Bisha and offered to talk to her. The guys left the room, and Dupree asked if the girl knew the meaning of the word chonjok. Bisha replied that yes, it is silence and calmness. Dupree said that was true, but he was talking about people who were in a political conflict. Bish clarified why Dupree was suddenly talking about politics, and then it occurred to her that perhaps what he meant to say was that there had been an incident with the carriage. In her mind, Biche added that her father had no political enemies whose relations were so bad that they would threaten to kill him. Dupree added that they were only speculating. Bish summarised that it appears that her father's political opponent decided to attack him and disguised the murder as an accident, but why and who decided to do it? The boys gave a name, Dirtle Emelian. Bish was horrified and questioned why her uncle would go to such a length. Benjamin recalled how when Dupree was a child, he said that he heard his parents talking about Jade. Around the same time, strange rumours started circulating in the imperial palace. It was rumoured that His Majesty was hiding his child, and right after that, the Marquis took Jade under his guardianship and took him to Emelian Manor. Bish asked why the conversation was suddenly about Jade. Dupree shared that he thought everyone in the imperial capital knew that Dirtle Emelian was a candidate to be the heir to the throne. Benjamin asked Bish to think hard, since Dirtle had seen them. Bish thought about it and assumed it was at the debutante ball. She realised that this was it, so the plot changed. In her previous life, she'd gone out at someone else's ball and Jade's status hadn't been revealed. Even on the contrary, he was ridiculed for his low status. And in this life, the ball was organised by her, and knowing in advance that this was how the prince would be. As a result, all the guests noticed the similarities between Jade and His Highness, and Uncle Dirtle was no exception. Bish mentally called herself a fool, a silly, silly fool. Dupree patted her on the head and told her not to think about it. It wasn't her fault. He was the one who asked her to organise the ball. The girl thanked him. Bish looked at Jade lying in bed thinking that he too had travelled back in time, so that at 10 years old, Jade was already an adult. His behaviour was actually quite mature. Suddenly Bish remembered the embarrassing moments of the past, and she realised that she was the only one who had been cranky. The girl grimaced at the thought of what would become of her now. The plan to return to the real world had failed. Did that mean she would stay here forever? Bish thought it had been 15 years, and she was even confused whether what was happening was real or a figment of her imagination. But she realised that the current world had become very close to her. Assuming she gets a chance to return to reality, will she accept it? Bish thinks not, but what would she do in this world? At that moment, Jade woke up and sat down on the bed and watched the girl. Jade started to reach out for Bish's head, but then he heard someone saying that he was still the same, stupid and brainless as he was when he stole someone else's. Jade clutched at his heart and tried to catch his breath. Bish woke up and immediately turned her attention to the sitting Jade, her eyes filled with tears. She shared that he hadn't woken up for 5 whole days, and they thought he was dying. Jade wondered if she was really worried. Bish sobbed and asked if she couldn't tell. He used magic, passed out, and didn't regain consciousness for days. Jade decided to ask if she was so worried about him, then why did she leave him alone to die? Bish remembered him asking her why she died instead of him, and that his magic was to reverse time. Jade distracted the girl and asked her to look at him, and stated that he wouldn't blame her for dying, for leaving him, or even for keeping her return back in time a secret. He added that it was enough for him that Bish was alive. The girl wondered how one could be so magnanimous as to forgive for all of this. Bish asked him how much magic he'd used to get back. She was sure it was an incredible amount, but was magic even capable of such a thing? Jade noted that even the impossible was possible. Bish placed her hand on Jade's arm and asked him how he was feeling, if he had any symptoms of insanity. Jade noted that she knew a lot, after which he added that there was no power that didn't have to be paid for. Bish clarified what price he'd paid. Jade replied that he didn't know yet, to which Bish called him a fool. But what if he'd gone to the other side or turned into a psycho? What would be the point of going back in time? Jade noted that she was alive after all, and he was already glad. Even if he died right now, he wouldn't regret his choice. For 5 years, he was happy every day because he could see her again. Bisha thought his words sounded like goodbye for some reason. Jade added that he didn't need anything else. However, if he'd known sooner that she remembered everything, it would have been better. Bish asked Jade why he was suddenly saying such things. Jade replied that, frankly, he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep his sanity. Jade felt sick, and Bish immediately asked him if he was okay, trying to figure out if he was physically unwell or mentally ill. Jade shared that while unconscious, he was confronted by some sort of creature. In the worst-case scenario, it could swallow him whole. Bish pointed out the curse. Surely it's because of the curse. Bish suggested he go to the temple. She knows how to break the curse. Cecilia, we should right now. But she faltered. They're still 15 and the Holy Maiden won't appear until 5 years from now. She realized she couldn't just let Jade go. She warned him that in 5 years, the curse would be broken. The girl turned to Jade and, sobbing, stated that she was so guilty. The main character, who is supposed to find happiness, might die because of her fault, all because she was talking nonsense before her demise. Jade turned to Bisha and stated that it doesn't matter what happens, and he asks her not to consider it pointless to save her. The girl told him not to say that. His words scare her. Jade said that he wanted her to live happily even if she didn't have him in her life, and he asked her to promise him that. The girl fell asleep with her head in Jade's lap. He wondered aloud how much longer he would get to see her. He didn't want to tell her about the magic and the curse, but it was clear from the look in her eyes that she knew. If he refused to become emperor, Bish would not die, and he had lived all this time thinking it would be better to protect her, knowing nothing, and then when the time came, just disappear. That's exactly what he had hoped to do. However, something inside won't let him let her go. If the heavens allowed, he would want to be by her side in his 20s and 30s, and for the rest of their lives. By rewinding time back 5 years, he was able to last 5 years. However, it was unknown when the magic would cloud his mind again. Due to the Marquis's sudden trip, which happened much earlier than it had in his first life, everything changed. The Marquis almost died this time, and he almost lost Bisha. He was scared to even imagine having to go through that again. A man appeared in the room and wondered if they really had everyone dying here. Jade turned around and saw his uncle. His uncle replied that he had rushed over as soon as he had received his frightening letter and addressed him as his nephew. Jade noted that he seemed intensely interested in what was going on. His uncle exhaled and wondered if it could have been otherwise. Because of his nephew, he had to abandon his journey halfway around the continent. Jade's uncle came closer to him and asked with interest, so how much magic did he need to turn back time? Was he able to control that much magic power? And what about his heart? Didn't it rupture? Jade asked his uncle to speak a little quieter. Then his uncle turned his attention to the girl sleeping on his nephew's lap. His uncle turned to the tribesman and told him not to say that he had turned back time because of the girl. Jade replied that he wondered if his uncle would find it funny if he answered yes because of her. His uncle chuckled and commented that his nephew knew him well, and so there was no lie in the letter. He also wondered if he had aged in the future, if he was cute. Jade suggested that his uncle end the humour and get to the point. The uncle agreed and added that he liked his nephew's serious look, preserved despite how many people had spilled their blood around him. The uncle suggested his nephew go to his castle. He might be able to slow the curse, but the future he promised something and said he would cure him completely, and that his skills were so advanced. Jade noted that they were no different than they were now. His uncle scolded and noted that his nephew seemed to be planning to convince him. He checked with his nephew to see when he would show up, since there was a chance he would die before he reached his uncle's castle in the north, and whether he thought it was worth a try. Jade took Bisha in his arms and declared that they were setting off now. Placing the girl on the bed, Jade looked at her, and his uncle at this point inquired a fervent goodbye. Jade replied that Bish was too fragile for that. She then leaned over and kissed her on the forehead and told her to see you later. The girl heard someone calling her name. The girl woke up abruptly and wondered why she was in Jade's bed. Standing next to her was Benjamin, whom she turned to and asked if he had seen Jade. Benjamin's face was sad. Bish excitedly asked him what was wrong, where he was. Bish ran up to the maids and asked them if Jade had passed that way. Louis appeared, and the girl began to ask him if he knew where Jade had gone. Louis replied that the truth was that His Highness the Archduke had stopped by last night. Bish clarified whether Louis was talking about Archduke Cartmel. Louis noted that yes, it seemed that Mr. Jade had followed him. Bish noted that Jade had sought out the Archduke because of his condition. She didn't understand why she hadn't realized it before, when he'd suddenly developed an interest in magic at the age of 10. So Jade, even then, knew that magic could consume the mind. All indications were that he too had gone back in time, and why couldn't she notice? Bish fell on Louis's chest and mentally called Jade a fool. After all, he could have said goodbye before he left. But she was glad, because Archduke Cartmel was a fanatic of magic and a member of the imperial family, and he could help Jade heal. She thinks it's for the best, and that Jade should be with the Archduke instead of someone who is of no use to her. However, she didn't understand why her heart hurt so much. She thought that she had only now realized that Jade was leaving her, because when you leave yourself, and when someone you care about leaves you, it is heaven and earth. She'd always wanted to leave the world, but it was hard to imagine what Jade had been going through after she'd died. She wondered if what was happening was her payment for the pain she'd caused him, if it was the same sadness you felt when the world around you collapsed. Drowning in sadness, all she can do is pray that Jade stays alive. The next day, after Jade had left their home without warning or farewell, they decided to make every effort to find out who was behind the assassins hired to kill their father. However, their search was limited to speculation, for the killers were dead and they had no time to learn anything from them. It's very difficult to get to the truth in this case. Until a few days later, when a letter arrived at their mansion with the news of death. It announced the death of the Emilian family's servant, Dirtel Emilian's uncle, and his followers. A ledger was found next to their bodies, stating that Uncle Dirtel had secretly stolen the Emilian family's property and appropriated it for himself. A few days later, they received a new letter. Perhaps its contents were related to the recent incident of an assassination attempt on her father, as he soon began to massively reorganize the service staff of their family. One day, as she passed by the knights, she overheard a conversation about a murder that had taken place at her uncle's mansion. They said there were 2 male witnesses with black hair, and Bish wondered if perhaps one of them was the one she longed for. Thus, the case in which their family had been involved came to an end, and in this life, the girl did not lose her father. Dupree opened his arms, and Bish asked him how to make sense of it, if he had decided to replace Jade. Dupree asked his sister not to talk nonsense, since Jade was his friend and she was his family. Bish noted that it was worth recognizing the fact, which she tried with all her might to deny, that compared to her real and first life here, the greater affection I began to feel for the second life in the novel. The maid notified Miss Emilian that the carriage was served. Bish thanked her, then got out of bed, and remembered Jade telling her that the sun was shining brightly today, and a girl should wear a hat before going out. Bish put the hat on, and turned to Jade, and said it was time to go. It was spring, 19-year-old Bish. She lives in a world where everything has changed. It had been 4 years since Jade had left. The coachman greeted the miss and asked if she was going to the temple again. Bish replied in the affirmative and asked to be taken there. Only one piece of the puzzle, Jade, had fallen out of her life, but it had entailed great deprivation of goals and life paths. The only place that could comfort her desolate soul was the temple. Bish sat in the temple and spoke aloud that, although it is said that no news is already good news, whereupon she cried out how there could be no word from him in 4 whole years. Everyone turned their attention to her. She coughed and finished that in the name of the goddess Josis, Amen. Someone turned to Miss Bish and noted that she was early today. Bish greeted the priest Michel. Michel is a high priest who awakened a sacred power at a very early age. People around him have even started talking about how he will become the next high priest in the near future due to his influence. And considering the content of the original, which she knows, he will actually become the high priest. Moreover, after only a few years. Afterward, Michel will clash with protagonist Jade in every way possible, seeing unequal combat in an attempt to protect the Holy Maiden from the Tyrant. However, the funny thing is that because Michel was feuding with Jade throughout the second half of the novel, he could seem like a villain, when in fact he was a good guy trying to protect the Holy Maiden. The only bad one in this situation was Jade. She remembered that the main character had wiped out the temple in a religious war, but that was because he was a tyrant at first. At first she didn't like Michel because he was Jade's rival, however. As she got to know him better, she realized that he was a good person from the 4 years they didn't become pretty tight friends. Bish shared that she had heard the temple dining room had a very good menu today, so she came early to pray so she could eat afterward. Michel noted that only the priests know the dining hall and wondered if Dupree had told her about it. Bish laughed and asked only not to tell him about it, please. She had seen for herself once she had sneaked into his room. Michel jokingly chided Mrs. Bichet that it was forbidden to enter the priest's chamber. Suddenly from behind they heard Dupree's voice, who said that he had not heard and clarified whether Bish had entered his room again. Michel at that moment asked the priest Dupree if he had forgotten that he was in charge of the prayer room today, and if he was only going there now. Dupree replied that of course not. Bish noted that Dupree is again in his repertoire. Even after becoming a priest, he can't fix his bad habit of being late. Dupree became a priest, and she thought that after he finished studying theology, he would get a job at the imperial palace and be a temple mediator. But perhaps his sacred power was more prominent than Bish expected. So he became a face. Looking at him, Bish thought about the fact that he was such a slacker and became a follower of the goddess of love. Bish crossed her arms and told Dupree that she was heartbroken, that despite his new position, he was still the same, and added that she would take an example from the priest lord and try hard to live as unsupervised as he did. Dupree indignantly asked if she was mocking him. Bichet approached Mr. Michel, saying that she thought Dupree lacked a bit of moral education, and how about ordering him to do some cleaning as a punishment? Michel replied that he hadn't even thought of that, but it wasn't a bad idea. Dupree decided to ask Bish why the daughter of the Marquis comes to the temple every day and eats here for free. Bish replied that she had her reasons, and that there was nothing tastier than free snacks. Some of the priests recognized her and noted that she had come today as well, and wished her a good meal. Bish thanked them and noted that it seems that the temple's food today had indeed received the blessing of the goddess. The other priests remarked that they think she is the only one who seeks blessing even in food. The reason she visits the temple every day, being a distant religion, is because of the content of the novel she remembers being associated with it. She prays for Jade's well-being and wishes for him to meet Cecilia, the one person who will help him heal from the curse. Bish doesn't know what else she can do for her, since it's unclear when he'll be back. In other words, she's been idle for the past 4 years. Folding her hands, Bish stated aloud for deliciousness, whereupon Dupree called her a glutton. The girl mentally told him he was a fool who didn't understand anything. Bish told Dupree that if he continued to bully her, he'd be sorry. Dupree, of course, believed her threats and reminded her to remember to drop off a donation on the way back, and to drop off a bigger one. Bish shared that today she had brought a very interesting item. Dupree couldn't believe his eyes. It was a book called The Count's Daughter's Naughty Night. In the 4 years of Jade's absence, she hadn't just been reading prayers. Since her concern for raising her childhood friend by a tyrant had run aground, she had to find a new hobby. She was lucky to find a book that was hard to find in the capital of the empire, and she had to pay extra to buy it. Dupree was shocked and asked where she got it from. Biche shared that she had to drive to Dick Kukuyevo to pick it up and pay extra on top of the dismissed cost. The girl reflected that she probably shouldn't have put that book on display in a crowded place. After all, Dupree is a priest, and she somehow didn't think. Dupree embarrassedly asked her why she was showing off this treasure so recklessly. Does she have any idea what kind of hyenas people are around here? Biche noted that explored expect, he has no shame or conscience. The girl shared with her cousin that this author has a new book coming out tomorrow. Dupree sadly replied that not that, because he had duty tomorrow, and the girl added that there was no point in going after work, and she was going to stand in line in the morning. Dupree took her hands in his and said that he would give her all his wages, to which the girl replied who needed his pennies. In her mind, she also wondered who he thought she was, for she was the daughter of a marquis. Dupree even suggested that he should become her servant and began to beg her to buy him a volume. Biche clarified that he was not a goddess servant. The next morning, Biche was already standing in line and was shocked, for there were 50 people in front of her. If there were only one book per customer, not only would she not be able to buy it for Dupree, but she might be left empty-handed. She wondered how long it would be if she went to the temple after the purchase. Suddenly there was a tap on her shoulder and she apologized. It was a girl who asked if Biche knew what time the bookstore opened. Biche smiled and said that it was 9 o'clock, but she thought that on a day like today they could get in a little earlier. The girl thanked her for the information. To tell the truth, the reason why everyone is standing outside the early morning store is especially to celebrate the release of a new work, or to be more precise, the coupons for the autograph session of the writer Sherbina, who will selectively put in some books. The book is called A Rose of Two Men and has an age limit of 17 plus. Biche stated that her coupon was crying. However, her little book is safe and sound, so what could be better? It's such a hot tome after all. Biche had already planned to take a quick peek at home first and then to the temple, but suddenly at that moment she bumped into a girl who started to fall down. Biche reached out her hand to catch her, but ended up grabbing the book, and the girl herself fell. Biche noted that it was a mistake, because any adequate person would have been catching the grandfather instead of reaching for the book. Biche held out her hand to the girl and asked if she was all right, and the girl thanked her in turn, talking about her precious book. Biche mentally noted that they both seemed to be inadequate with her. Then she noticed what had fallen out of the book and offered the fallen girl a conversation. Biche noted that she thought the girl had already realized on her own that she was an ardent fan of Sherbina. Biche added that her lifelong wish is to shake her golden hands at least once, although originally her greatest wish was to return to reality and once to support the throat of the writer of the novel she was inside, so maybe she'd be lucky to get a new wish. The girl decided to ask Biche how long she had been a fan of Sherbina. Biche shared that she even has a debunked work, The Rose of Three Men, which she wrote under a little-known pseudonym. Her interlocutor was shocked. She thought the book was nowhere to be found. Biche sadly noted that only 100 copies had been published worldwide, and most of them had been lost. Biche simply kept the memories from her first life here, and quietly bought the books on the day of the sale. She shared with her interlocutor that she had all 3 volumes, for reading, exhibition, and personal, and if the girl would take Biche with her to an autograph session, she would give her 1 volume. The invitation coupon allows you to bring a friend, and she checked with the girl for any suggestions. Her interlocutor said, after a moment, that it was a deal, and Biche replied that she was a pleasure to do business with. In her mind, Biche noted that she could now return to the mansion in peace, because her plan for the day was done. She had bought a book, gotten a coupon, but she had not visited the temple. Biche remembered that they hadn't introduced each other yet, and said that her name was Biche Emilian, and her companion took off her hat and said that her name was Cecilia. She asked the girl to say her name again, to which she replied that her name was Cecilia Donkin. She had black hair and a pale, lily-like face. Biche decided to ask where she was from, and Cecilia replied that she had grown up in the north, in Churchville. Bish was starting to shake a little. After all, she hadn't gotten out of the temple for 4 whole years, trying to find Cecilia. She only showed up now, and why they even met? Buying the novel, 17+. The girl's name is Bisha Emelian. She was an ordinary office worker from South Korea. But one day her soul moved into the body of the heroine of a novel called Holy Girl, Re-Educated Tyrant. The heroine was a childhood friend who dies at an early age, causing the protagonist Jade to become a tyrant. From him as such, she fulfilled the role of Bish and was about to return to reality, but instead she returned not home at a time when the heroine was 10 years old. She realized that the events of the novel were strong last time, so she failed to build the plot and according to the original, and took up again to try to turn the main character Jade into a tyrant. However, it turned out that he was the one who turned the clock back. After using dangerous magic that could take his own life, Jade followed his uncle, Archduke Cartmel, and fled to an unknown destination. In the 4 years since the disappearance of the protagonist, Jade, the girl literally never left the temple in an attempt to find the original protagonist, the holy maiden Cecilia, who could rid Jade of the curse. Bish was in shock while Cecilia was saying something very cheerfully. Bish didn't understand how she had happened to meet her right here. Bish asked Cecilia how long she had loved this kind of work. Cecilia cheerfully replied that it had been a long time. Bish thought about the fact that she had imagined her to be a drastically different person. Bish also decided to find out what her hobbies were. Maybe it was embroidery or painting. Cecilia replied that she was far from it. Her drawing skills were at the level of a preschooler, and if she took up embroidery, she would be stabbing all over herself and the thread would go. Here the girl thought, maybe this is not Cecilia, which she needs. She just began to deny reality. Because the appearance, name and surname are the same. Cecilia's last name resembled the word donut, so she memorized it in no time. Cecilia turns to Miss Bish and asks if she has read the work. Bish thinks there's something here, for Cecilia, who knows, is far from having the same character. Bright as a lily, that Cecilia is totally different. She has never been so energetic. First Jada, and now the protagonist. What's wrong with them all? Why is it like this? There is nothing original in this world. Bish decided that although the character might change, she would think positively. On the contrary, it is good that the main character is awake and active. It is now of paramount importance for her to get the main character back on track, to somehow get the novel back on track with the plot of the original. Cecilia's climb up the stairs revealed that she had never been in temples before, which surprised Bisha very much. She mentally noted that it was also understandable, because Cecilia only realized her sacred power when there is a knock of 20. If one were to give her an ability test now, wouldn't it be a disaster? Bish shared that this is the first hall. Cecilia was astonished and noted that it turns out even the air is different in places where handsome people gather. Bish mentally replied that it was the smell of the incense sprayed in the temple, and then clarified aloud about the handsome men. Cecilia asked Miss Bish if she hadn't looked at the new building's illustration of the capital's beauties. Bisha understood what it was about, and said she had purchased it in perfume copies. Illustrations of the capital's handsome men, a collection of portraits of the now popular handsome men of the imperial capital. Cecilia shared that that was when she learned that priests had such angelic looks, and to tell the truth, it was in this edition that she found her ideal type of man. Bish mentally decided to ask her darling and her protagonist if she would like to know that she entered the temple service with only lustful thoughts in her head. Cecilia turned Mrs. Bish's attention to herself and asked her who the gentleman was, for she thought she had seen him in a book. Bish imagined it was Priest Michel and scum of some sort, though it was her cousin Dupree, but she decided not to say his name. Bish greeted Priest Michel, who in turn noted that he, Ware, and Mrs. Bish. Dupree inquired why she did not see him. The girl said she would like to introduce someone to them, but Lady Cecilia had hidden behind a column. Bish approached her and asked what she was doing here. Cecilia embarrassedly replied that the gentleman's name was Michel. Just seeing him in person instead of in a picture made his heart flutter. Bisha thought it was cute because she remembered that there were readers who were holding their fists for the couple, Cecilia and Michel. There was chemistry between them. Lady Cecilia, sitting in a corner like this, Biche thinks she draws a lot more attention to herself, but sincerity would make her very pretty. Biche squatted down beside Cecilia and said that she could talk to Michel because she knew him well. Cecilia was shocked and said that Mrs. Bichet was an incredible girl. Cecilia awkwardly said hello, to which Michel replied to her that may the blessing of the goddess be with them. Biche happily remarked that they had met, and then she remembered that Michel was in the new edition of Illustrations of the Capital's Handsome. Cecilia clutched the hem of her dress, and saying she was pleased to meet him, she bowed to Dupree, calling him Mr. Michel, and adding that she was honoured to greet him. Biche alerted Cecilia that they seemed to be mistaken, but the girl stated that it was indeed him. Biche was shocked. This world is completely different from the one described in the novel. During the tea party, a blushing Cecilia watched Dupree carefully. In the meantime, Bissy thought woefully that she had made a big mistake. She had known that the collection of illustrations showed the faces of the boys were too embellished, but she had never imagined that Dupree's portrait would be there. Bissy wondered if he was what Cecilia called her ideal type. She said he had such an angelic appearance that it made her heart flutter to see such beauty. Michel decided to ask Mrs. Biche if this girl was a friend of hers. Biche replied that yes, they had just recently met, and that she and Lady Cecilia had very similar tastes in books. Michel smiled and pleasantly remarked that they enjoyed literature. Biche mentally apologised to Mr. Michel. She's afraid it's a bit not the literature he had in mind. Cecilia apologised and inquired as to the name of the second priest, that is, Dupré. Biche replied that his name was Dupré, and she was her mother's cousin and the priest king. Cecilia was amazed and stated that Miss Cecilia is just something. Cecilia noted that they have a similar eye colour. Biche exhaled heavily, noting that Blood was so unlucky to be anything like Dupré. Dupré asked her sister indignantly if she'd had enough. Michel noted that for some reason it was fun to watch the two of them fighting, to which Dupré and Biche replied that they were both having a lot of fun. Biche turned to Mr. Michel and asked him if a goddess should necessarily accept even such a goofball. Maybe she should go to be a priestess. Michel sadly reminded that they had already conducted the test several times, but unfortunately there was not a single drop of sacred power in her. Unexpectedly, Biche turned to Michel-san and asked him if he could test Cecilia's sacred power. Michel was surprised to hear about the power test. At an early age, Cecilia was examined for magical and sacred power, and as a result, a girl who happens to be in the capital city discovers it in herself after a test. Biche shared that Cecilia grew up in a small village in the north, so she was never tested for sacred power. So how about we take the opportunity to take the test now? Cecilia awkwardly inquired if this was something she had told Biche about. Biche nervously replied that the girl had said that Churchville was in the north, and also that she lived in a small village and that it was the first time they had been in the temple. Michel replied that it really wasn't a bad idea. Biche thought about how she almost got herself into trouble. Michel asked Cecilia to please place her palm on the crystal and recite a prayer. Cecilia placed her hand and began to recite the prayer. The blessing of the goddess flows down the tree of life. And Dupré immediately pointed out to Mr. Michel that this was sacred power. Biche joyfully thought about the result. Unexpectedly, the crystal shattered under Cecilia's hand. Dupré pointed out that a crystal can't just shatter like that. And what kind of light was it? Michel replied that he would have to see the high priest. Cecilia apologised and asked if she would need to be compensated for the damage. After that day, Cecilia was received into the temple of Joses and honoured as a holy maiden. As soon as the high priest received the news from Michel, he rushed to them in haste. Everyone bowed to Cecilia, and the high priest declared that all the lower creatures of the temple of the goddess Josis welcomed the holy maiden. In the novel, the scene of Cecilia revealing her sacred power looked grandiose. Then absolutely all the priests of the temple would gather around her. This time, however, whether Biche, Michel, Dupré, and the high priest bowed their heads to her and paid their respects. The high priest, by means of sacred power, received an oracle from the goddess, in which it was written that a maiden with black hair would appear, find the sun that hid in the darkness, and save the world. It is impossible to say that these words are wrong, because the son that the goddess said was not a real son, but Jade, who in the future would become an emperor, or more precisely, Jade the Tyrant. That's how Bish found the long-awaited holy girl, and now she has nothing to do again. All that remains is to wait for Jade's return. Sitting at the table, Bish spoke aloud to Jade and told him that she missed him very much. Then Bish heard that an urgent message had come in. Louis apologized to His Excellency the Marquis and informed him that an urgent letter had arrived. The Marquis read it with a troubled face and immediately burned it in the fireplace. Louis inquired if it had unpleasant contents. The letter was from the Archduke Carpmel. Bishi came into his father's study and asked if it was true. Louis looked down the corridor and closed the door to announce that no one was there. The Marquis clarified who had delivered the letter. Louis replied that that person had immediately disappeared after giving it to him. Perhaps it was a visual illusion that the Archduke had created with magic. The messenger himself had kept his mouth shut. Bish couldn't stand it and brought it to her father's attention and told him to let her know what was in the letter. Why did Archduke Carpmel suddenly hand over a message that was written by a man who hadn't responded to them in 4 whole years? Bish asked how Jade was doing. Marcus asked his daughter to listen carefully. She had not entered his office now, and there was no letter either. Her father had not received it and had not looked at it. Bish asked indignantly what it said that they... But she didn't have time to finish. Her father interrupted her and said that later he would explain everything a little later. Bish angrily cut the cloth and wondered if she should run away from home. She had managed to raise some money, so if she could get to the Archduchy, she might be able to meet Jade somehow. Since she had not heard from him, she could only go to him herself. Michelle turned to Mrs. Bish and remarked that it wasn't necessary to cut everything, but he was grateful for her help. Mrs. Bish stated that she would put it back the way it was and leave. Bish asked Michelle if he was busy now, because she had heard that all the priests were rushing back and forth. Michelle shared that the Holy Maiden had asked him vehemently to let her meet with Bish when she arrived. Bish was a little surprised that Lady Cecilia wanted to meet her. Rumours of the Holy Maiden's appearance spread throughout the Empire in a flash. All the manpower has been deployed to prepare the Holy Maiden's welcoming ceremony. If Bish had known that this would happen, she would have had fun with Cecilia first and then bring her to the temple. But now that her closest friend had become the busiest person in the world. Bish turned to Mr. Michel, deciding to share with him what was bothering her. The girl asked when Lady Cecilia would become a Holy Maiden, what kind of work she would do, and if she would live in the temple. Due to the fact that in the original, the reader was only shown a love tug-of-war after meeting Jade, she doesn't really know anything about Cecilia's schedule at the temple. Won't it make her feel even harder for forcing her to become a Saint Maiden before her due date? Michel stated that there is no work for a Saint Maiden. She is doing the temple a favour by interacting with the faithful from time to time and simply existing. Bish realised that she had been worried for nothing. The job was for 5 points. Lady Cecilia and Bisi met. Miss Bish noticed the sacred atmosphere around the Holy Maiden after the meal at the temple. Cecilia sadly asked why Mrs. Bish had come only now, and moreover, she had more important things to talk about. Bish didn't understand what it was, but Cecilia whispered in her ear that the autograph session was in 2 days. Bish screamed, and Michelle asked her if something was wrong. The girl stated nothing, and the next moment they were already seated in the gazebo, and Cecilia shared that she had been so busy the last few days that she couldn't even leave the temple. Cecilia asked Mrs. Bish what she should do. She would miss an opportunity that could be 1 in a million. Bish thought that she seemed to have really rushed into making her a holy maiden. Bish asked Cecilia if there was no way she could leave the temple, to which the saint replied dejectedly that she had to sacrifice her own lunchtime to see her because she was very, very busy. Bish pointed out that she had no other choice, to which Cecilia replied dejectedly that she knew she couldn't leave, since she was a saint now. Bish suggested she run away, which shocked Cecilia. The day of the autograph session came and Bish was already excited that they had the first place. They were the first in line. She met Cecilia early in the morning before all the other priests were up and they went straight to the autograph session. And who knew they'd be lucky enough to be first in line? Bisha thought about bragging to Dupree afterward, making him jealous. Cecilia remarked happily that it looked like they were the first, and she added that she was very lucky to meet Mrs. Biche, and also the writer Sherbina would probably be arriving very soon. Such a good time together, she should not have taken on the position of Holy Maiden before her time. The temple will most likely have some unfamiliar priests alone, maybe attend the welcoming ceremony before leaving for the Archduchy. Suddenly, Lady Cecilia shuddered, and Biche asked her what was the matter, to which the girl herself asked what it was, and pointed her finger. It turned out to be Imperial troops. Biche realised that no, it looked like ordinary soldiers. You couldn't see the emblem of the Empire anywhere on them. Not to mention the attire, these people don't even have a flag, the symbol of the Imperial troops. However, there are completely different soldiers following them in a row. They belong to completely different families. Biche suggests that it looks like all the soldiers are heading straight to the Imperial Palace. Cecilia worriedly remarked that such a huge army is going to the palace. Is there really a war on? Biche replied that she thinks it hasn't, otherwise they wouldn't be alive anymore. If it were an attack by another state, it would not have been so quiet. In times of war, the soldiers would have started exterminating all the civilians on the streets. Cecilia turned to Madame and asked her what they should do, if they could stay here any longer. As far as Biche knows, war is not supposed to happen yet. She began to speculate that maybe this was a training or gathering of soldiers, but there are too many of them and the atmosphere is strange. Suddenly a carriage pulled up next to the girl and stopped, and someone called out to Biche and the Holy Maiden. It was Dupree, who grabbed them under the arms and declared that they should return now. Dupree turned to Biche in the carriage and angrily asked her sister if she was crazy enough to bring the Holy Maiden to such a place. She said the autograph session of the writer Sherbina, and secretly. And then he turned to Cecilia and asked the Holy Maiden if she had her own head on her shoulders. Biche sadly noted that Cecilia actually wanted the autograph session more than she did. Dupree indignantly asked if Cecilia had any idea how freaked out they all were. The Holy Maiden apologized. Biche turned to Dupree and seriously asked him what was going on in the capital. Where did such an army come from? Was war coming? Dupree exhaled heavily and replied that in His Majesty the Emperor had passed away. The girls were shocked. Biche hoped with all her might that the only thing that wouldn't happen was the usurpation of the throne. In the original novel, however, Jade had seized the throne as soon as he turned 20, but the Jade of today was not the same as in the original novel. Biche wondered if the Emperor had died because of him. Biche began to wail aloud that it couldn't be, it couldn't be. She remembered Jade's words that he wasn't interested in ascending to the throne, because if he got it he would lose so much more. Jade had said those words to her, so why would he do the same thing a second time? Dupree added that no one knows the details. The entire Imperial Palace is now thoroughly detached. Biche turned to Dupree and asked if he would give them a ride home, a letter that came 4 years later, whose contents should be burned. Biche concluded that perhaps her father knew everything. Biche flew into the house and immediately asked Louis where her father was and whose carriage it was in front of the mansion. Louis replied that His Excellency, the Marquis, was receiving a guest. Biche did not understand what kind of a guest at such a moment, whereupon she declared that she must see her father at once. Biche burst into her father's study and called out to him. Macris was shocked by his daughter's abrupt appearance. Biche looked at the man and mentally wondered if this was the guest. It was the Archduke Cartmel, who declared that this was the turnaround, and remarked that the girl had grown up to be a beauty. Bissy remembers exactly that she has not seen this man, neither in her past life nor in her current life, so why does he seem familiar to her? Bissy asked the Archduke if he knew her. He replied that they had met once before. Biche seriously asked him who he was, to which the man replied that he would introduce himself formally the next time they met, then shared that he thought it was time for him to leave. Lastly, the Archduke addressed the Marquis Emilian that he expects him to respond after he has given his proposal a good thought, then left and told my lady to see you later. Bissy turned to her father and asked seriously what had happened at the Imperial Palace. She had heard that His Highness the Emperor had passed away, The Marquis stated that this was true, to which a question from the daughter asked for what reason. The father replied that it was because of illness, but Bish thought that was a lie and head-on decided to ask if it was because of Jade. The father was silent to her question, and she realised that meant it was. Bish clenched her fist and started asking questions. When did he come back? How long have they known about this? And one question she left in her mind was if her father was involved. She had learned the truth today, and it wouldn't reach the public anytime soon. Everything would be kept secret, so that not a word would leak out until a new emperor ascended the throne. In the past life, the news of the emperor's demise was not publicised for a very long time. Bish decided to find out if Jade had become emperor. The Marquis excitedly wanted to ask how his daughter knew, but she summarised that she had no doubt that Jade was emperor again. The holy maiden was walking in the temple grounds in place with Dupree when the latter suddenly stopped and blocked her with himself, which dumbfounded Cecilia a bit. Dupree saw Benjamin and asked him what he was doing here. Cecilia noted that Benjamin had the same amber eyes as Mr. Dupree and Mrs. Biche. Benjamin greeted the holy maiden Cecilia. He stated that he had come to convey an order from the imperial family. At this point, Biche asked his father if he had contributed to what had happened. The Marquis stated that, no, he had not. And in this life Jade came to the throne, he follows the path of the original novel, or he had other reasons. Biche worriedly asked if he was hurt, if he was getting better. But she mentally answered her own question that she thought yes, that's why he couldn't usurp the throne. Jade had once again killed his own father and become emperor, and the girl felt more at peace that he was alive than the shock of the news of the emperor's demise. The Marquis stated that the emperor is currently in good health, which reassured Bisha, and she replied that she was very glad. Bish is sure her father is also distraught that the adopted son he raised as his own has mutinied in the blink of an eye. Surely the letter from Archduke Carpmel told him to accept the new imperial authority, and fearing for his daughter, the Marquis couldn't refuse. The girl had been praying for 4 years that Jade would stay alive, so why the disappointment in the greenhouse? She began to mentally call him an unfeeling chump, a scoundrel. There was a huge amount of questions in her mind. How he was doing with magic. Why did he become emperor? He hadn't sent her any news. Bish came to the conclusion that she thought only meeting him in person would make her feel better. She decided to stop everything already on the web of contemplation. After all, Jade is fine, and that's enough. However, I'm still very curious how he's grown. Maybe as brave as he was in his last life. Whether he's grown much, and whether his beautiful violet eyes still shine with cheerfulness. The shape of them has probably gotten a little sharper, and the colour of his hair still looks like black. These thoughts made a smile appear on her face. Had he become emperor? Had he begun to wear many lovely clothes? A beautiful robe of laughing white fox, adorned with precious stones, a crown? He must still be reaching out to his subjects. She chuckled and noted that right, just like now. Then her gaze saw him, Jade, in the very form she had envisioned him in. She thought her mind had left her, though. She ran through the manor, not sure why the image she was imagining suddenly appeared in front of her eyes, or if it was a hallucination. When she got to the garden, she didn't see anyone. Because of the constant thoughts of Jade and the intense longing, the illusions enslaved her mind. Standing in the garden, she stated aloud that she missed her. However, Jade did appear, and after saying that she was still giving up quickly, put a fur coat on her shoulders. Hugging the girl from the back, he admitted that he missed her, a lot. He was crazy to see her. Bish thought about how he was so familiar, but at the same time he wasn't. It was the voice she missed. Jade confessed that he thought he would go crazy if he didn't see her soon. Her scent, her curls, her voice, her golden eyes languished in his heart. Bish turned to him and realised it was really him. The girl began to cry and wondered why he had only come now, and mentally asked why there had been no word from him. She didn't even know if he was alive all this time. Bish didn't understand why the first thing he did was to come to the imperial capital and not to her. There were so many questions, worries, and resentments in her heart. Jade hugged her, and a sobbing Bish in his arms declared that he was bad. The guy just asked for forgiveness, and for her to stop crying or her eyes would turn red. Bichet noted that she was actually crying out of him. The girl began to inundate him with questions about what had befallen him, how his health was, whether the Archduke was feeding him well. She also noticed that he had grown taller and his complexion was good. He wasn't hurt anywhere. Jade smiled, for Bissy's questions are always a great surprise. The girl indignantly asked what he thought she should ask. Jade replied that at least about food, he thought it was nothing to worry about. Bish asked how he was feeling. What about magic? If his heart was okay, if he had found a way to break the curse. Jade responded by simply stroking her head and replied that if he had been destined to die, he wouldn't have come to her. Bish took his word to mean that if he realized he was dying, he would die in secret from her. So she indignantly told him not to say that, and that if he was going to die, he should die next to her. Jade laughed and asked if she was asking him to die now, to which Bish indignantly replied that he knew she didn't mean it. Jade said that to die with her by his side, he'd have to stay glued to her for the rest of his life. She didn't understand why the conversation was going that way. Unexpectedly, Bisha decided to ask what had become of His Majesty the Emperor. Jade replied that he had died, of course. Bish also decided to clarify what happened to the prince, to which Jade replied that he didn't know. The girl noted that fate would not be clear. The principal was still alive, and she realized she had to ask why he had made the same choice again. Jade took Bish's hand, declaring that he wasn't the Jade she knew. The girl didn't understand what he meant not the Jade she knew him to be back then. The guy seriously replied that that goofy idiot died with her that day. Suddenly, we see a flashback from childhood, where Bish asks if he likes flowers. Jade then clarified if she was really asking him, to which the girl replied, "That isn't there, someone else there." The boy then replied that it wasn't that he liked them, but he didn't hate them. Bish didn't understand how so, since there are only two options, like them or not. Jade decided to ask her if she liked them, and she said that she obviously liked them, but not that they were beautiful, especially the sakura. Jade decided to correct her, saying they were peach trees. It was embarrassing. Jade thought it was her house, and Bish called him a smartass. After a moment, Bish took the book out of his hands and asked if he wanted to read other books together, instead of this one. Jade looked at the book she offered to read and remarked that she had strange tastes. After a while, Bish fell asleep on the book, and Jade thought about what they wanted to read together. Looking at the sleeping Bish, he remembered how dead she looked and woke up abruptly. It was a nightmare, Jade himself lying in bed with bandaged wounds. Archduke Carmpel appeared and remarked that he didn't look well. Jade and the Archduke were in the camp. Cartmel was dressing Jade's wounds and noted that it was the first time in the history of the Empire that a ruler had such a short name. Jade wondered what was the point of inheriting the name of the family that had abandoned him. The Archduke was silent at first, and then added that it had only been a month since he had sent troops to destroy the barbarians. The Empire was already at war with a neighbouring state, and if he left things as they were, trouble would happen. Jade wondered why he had come, for it was unlikely that he had come all the way here to see death again. But the Archduke gave only one name, Bish Emelian. It had been 2 years since the Emelian family was destroyed for the sins of His Majesty. After saying that, Jade sharply put his sword to the Archduke's throat and added that it looks like he came looking for his death. Archduke Cartmel stated that he had come to help him. Jade clarified if he was talking about the war now, to which the Archduke replied that if he provided the people with the wizard's head, it would help. After a moment, however, he asked if Jade was still interested in the forbidden magic they had once talked about. Jade dropped his sword and said he might be. The Archduke shared that, naturally, the results of forbidden magic could be bad, and he wouldn't recommend taking that risk, but it didn't make much difference to Jade whether he died on the battlefield or now. Jade replied that that was true. Nothing mattered to him if he could see her again. The Archduke gave him the imperial speed and added that he would still need his power. If he wasn't lucky, she seemed to be in a time trap where the concept of time didn't exist. Jade stated that sounded much better than living in the current meaningless time. The Archduke remarked that he didn't realise things were urgent. Well, Jade had him, an old helpless man, in a tizzy. Jade remarks that if he keeps talking like that, someone might actually think he's elderly. The Archduke wonders if Jade will get younger if he goes through the time loop, and if he meets the Archduke again, please let him tell him that he helped Jade go back in time. Cartmel added that he doesn't know how long the time travel will take, but he asked that he not be blamed if Jade fails and dies you the cracks of time. Jade needs to focus all his energy on the process, and if he does get to the past, please let him seek out Archduke Cartmel. Jade asked why he was only telling him now, to which the Archduke replied that it was because he didn't think His Majesty would choose to destroy himself. Outside, they began to shout that it was an ambush. The Archduke shouted to Jade to go. He wanted to object, but Cartmel reminded him of his words that the present time was of no importance to him anyway, and if they interrupted the trial, Jade would lose his only chance. The Archduke told him to depart sooner rather than later. He hoped that Jade would be in the time he wished to be. Jade disappeared, but he thanked the Archduke one last time. Jade moved and immediately heard that he was not to leave here, that he was not to leave the room until the sinner was finished. He emphasized the words leprosy on the sinner and asked what year it was. There was a disrespectful attitude from the guard. Jade grabbed one of the guards by the collar and asked what execution he was talking about and let him answer. The guard was puzzled, not sure what he meant, for the execution on the Emilian family, of course. Jade straightened out all the guards and realized he was back in the past where Bish was alive. Seconds lasted an eternity in a place he had nightmares of every night, a place where she had faded away. When Jade saw her, he called the girl by name and she turned her attention to him. He asked her to stop talking, but the girl said that it was true. She had killed the Emperor. Jade shouted at her to stop and that he killed the Emperor. There was an uproar among the people. They didn't understand what was going on. Was the new Emperor really protecting a traitor? A man holding a sword close to the girl's throat declared that he would end her immediately. Jade asked Bisha to please stop doing this. It was all his fault. He asked her not to die because of him. He asked her not to do this and not to leave him. Bish covered her eyes and said that her role was over. Jade yelled for Bish to say it wasn't her and he would protect her. He feels like he has heard those words 100 times, each one echoing in his head. Jade stated that he came here to keep her from dying, to see her again. The executioner asked what he was doing, for they must punish the criminal. Jade took a sword and put it to his throat, stating that if the girl dies, he will go after her. Does she really think he wants to watch her die again? The guards started yelling at His Majesty not to do it, while grabbing the Emperor's sword and telling him to deal with the traitor sooner rather than later. Jade shouted to be let in, and at the same moment Bisha's body was pierced with the sword. Jecht began to scream at what he saw. Sitting next to Bisha's grave, he realized that there was no point in coming back, how he wished it was all a nightmare. His life had become a living hell because he had seen Bish die twice. He didn't understand how he was going to go on. He noticed that the magic was trying to heal him. After that, he considered that it really was more like a curse. If he bleeds out, if his heart is ripped out, will he be able to face Bisha again? Jade was found by Archduke Cartmel, who noted that this is where his nephew is. Cartmel shared that for some reason, he felt magical energy emanating from his nephew and wondered if something was wrong. Jade remembered what his uncle had said, that if he did go back in time, he could find him, please. He wondered why he couldn't think of that before, since Cartmel existed in this time as well. Jade grabs his uncle and starts asking for his help, telling him that he's back in time. He doesn't know what it's like in the future, but his magic isn't as strong now, so there's a good chance of failure. If before he was able to turn back time with a minimal amount of mana, the cost now will be much greater. Archduke Cartmel stated that going back might kill him. Jade replied that it didn't matter. Jade's uncle added that if everything worked out, he hoped his nephew would meet the great Archduke of another time, and he asked to be sure to give the other him what he was about to do. And Cartmel also remembered and decided to ask if he was also called crazy in the future. Jade replied that he was even worse, to which his uncle grinned, wondering what he had done, and then wished his nephew good luck. When Jade opened his eyes, he saw the maid addressing him. From the open window came the smell of flowers. A familiar room was around, and he realized it was the Emilian family mansion. The maid asked if he was awake, and noted that if he slept by the open window, he'd catch a cold. Jade wondered how far he'd gotten this time. but he was certainly glad he hadn't fallen into the laziness of execution. Almost immediately he thought of Bissy, for if he was back in his childhood, so was Bissy. Walking into her bedroom, he saw her sleeping soundly. Mentally, he declared to Bish that he would be by her side, an opportunity granted by the imperial blood that Jade had vehemently cursed. Jade had declared then that she was under his protection from now on. He swore on his life that he would never lose her again. He was not the Jade she knew, for that naive, kindly man had died with her. Bish was puzzled that he was not the Jade she knew, but who was the Jade in front of her? Jade stated that he had no doubt now that he had to protect her even with the value of his life, or anything else. He stated that he is willing to get his hands dirty in blood and more than once. For now the only thing that is clear to him is that Bish will not have to protect him because of his weakness. Bish realized everything. Jade's banishment had happened much earlier than his rebirth. It had happened so that Bish couldn't interfere. The girl clarified about the curse, if he knew how to break it. She was trying to figure out how far the plot had progressed since the rebirth, how much Jade knew, whether he was aware of Cecilia's existence. Jade stated that there was no way to break the curse. Bish mentally replied that there is one, she knows for sure. If her prediction was correct, Jade should have been back before she had even met Cecilia. Jade noted that they could slow down the curse, and he added not to let the girl worry about him. Bish suddenly told Jade that he wasn't going to die. No way. She is no longer the same girl who for 4 years was good for nothing and always gave up. For she was able to find Saint Cecilia, and now Jade will survive. Jade told Bisha he had to go. She mentally noted that yes, it was dangerous to leave the palace in this situation. Jade said he would pick her up when the situation settled down. Bish didn't quite understand why he was going to take her. Did he really want her to come to the ceremony? But aloud she simply replied that she would wait. Jade stepped away from the girl a little, turned and looked at her. She smiled and waved at him, but he ran toward her and wrapped his arms around her. She wanted to ask him why he was doing this, but she didn't make a sound because she suddenly felt the wetness of tears on her shoulder. She'd missed Jade terribly all that time, and he must have been through a lot too. For the first time in a long time, she began to care for him as he cared for her. Jade returned to his palace. Benjamin met him and asked if he had returned from a night out, to which Jade replied that he knew as well as he did that he was in no condition to go out. Benjamin replied that he understood the man's reluctance to say where he'd gone. Jade noted that the garden of their mansion was perfect for a walk, to which Benjamin said that the man had apparently decided to mess with him, whereupon he approached Jade and asked him how he was feeling after being with the one he'd missed, and where his cape was anyway. There was no hiding anything from Benjamin. Jade cheerfully asked back, as he thought to himself. Benjamin hugged himself and said he was wet with tears. Such a sensitive, long-awaited reunion. Jade noted that Benjamin had pretty good reasoning skills. The next moment, Benjamin wondered if Jade had beaten up Bish. He thought she was pretty reckless. Jade seriously asked, "How can you say that about a girl?" Benjamin realized his mistake and decided to also ask Jade what he was going to do with the Crown Prince. Jade stated that he would let him live. Benjamin suggested that Jade's sympathy would force the Crown Prince to live a miserable existence. Jade replied that he might be useful in the future, so they would keep him for a while. Benjamin responded by asking why he had then killed the Duke. The Duke of Persia and his army expressed their position that they wanted a Crown Prince on the throne, but before they could do anything about it, they fell by Jade's sword. The Crown Prince, who had been forgotten, suddenly rose in the eyes of the people, as rumours spread throughout the empire that the new emperor was a tyrant. Instead of getting the elders on his side, it's better to spread rumours of Jade's cruelty, because that way his power and authority will be strong enough. He's doing it that way because he's already been through something like this once. Jade squeezed the paper and said that even if the Duke paid twice, it wouldn't be enough. In fact, Jade didn't like the idea of keeping the Crown Prince alive either. Mrs. Bish was notified that she had received a letter from the temple. Bish wondered if it was from Mr. Michel or maybe from Dauphin, but the sender of the letter turned out to be Cecilia. In this letter, the Holy Maiden wrote, "Messrs. Bichet, please help." Bisha stated aloud that she needed to get to the temple anyway, before the coronation ceremony began. As Bisha stepped out of the carriage, Cecilia ran up to her in a flash. Bisha asked her why she was so dishevelled, and she had heard that the ceremony had been postponed. Due to the demise of the previous emperor and the coronation of the new emperor, the goddess's welcoming ceremony was postponed or even temporarily cancelled, which is only natural. Still, the coronation of the new emperor should be a more significant event. It looks like the beginning of a conflict between religion and the new monarchy. Cecilia turned to Lady Biche and sadly announced that the new emperor had summoned her to the palace. Biche was surprised that Jade had summoned Cecilia. The Holy Maiden added that although the temple had forbidden it, but the imperial family was so insistent, even the Grand Duke came to the temple. Since Cecilia mentioned the Grand Duke, it was talking about Grand Archduke Carpmal. Perhaps in the past 4 years, they have found clues related to the miraculous power that can break Jade's curse. So regardless of the political reasons, the unification of the miraculous power of Goddess Cecilia and the temple is also necessary. As much as it is confusing, the story will follow the plot of the original idea until the very end. Cecilia shared that she had heard that the new emperor is an extreme frightening man, and there is a rumour that he beheaded ministers in cold blood. Biche, dumbfounded, asked how that was possible. The Holy Maiden fearfully asked what if he kills her too. Biche didn't understand where she got such nonsense in her head and replied to calm down. Biche added that people tend to exaggerate, so it wasn't that bad, and she didn't see how Jade could be so cruel. She remembered that in the original novel he had been a tyrant, but this time she had trained him well. Cecilia sadly noted that she had suddenly become a goddess and now had to face the dreaded emperor. The girl genuinely didn't understand when her life had gone downhill. Biche mentally replied to her complaint that everything from the day she met her at the bookstore, or maybe the moment she became a fan of an adult novel. However, the answer most likely lies in the fact that she is the protagonist. Biche turned to Cecilia. "I told her not to worry so much, poor really. She knows a little about their new His Majesty the Emperor." Cecilia was astonished. Biche stated that they are actually friends since childhood. These words shocked Cecilia. Is Mrs. Biche really friends with this creepy man? Mentally, Biche replied that there is nothing creepy about him. He is the sweetest man on the planet. But out loud, she told the Holy Maiden not to worry. After all, he is a good man, and he is also very handsome. Biche heard that they were ordered to organise the coronation in a simple way, but she didn't expect so few people to attend. Biche asked Cecilia if everything was all right. The Holy Maiden replied that it was the first time she had come here, so she was a little frightened, and there were so many high officials around, she could not recover from the shock. That's right. How can the Marquis stand where the important ministers and noble priests of the temple are? This scene must seem strange to her. Biche gave Cecilia a sneaky remark that in any case, it's fine. Anyway, it's not such an event for Jade. Biche noted that the temple attendants will protect the goddess. After all, she has God on her side. What should she be afraid of then? Cecilia smiled and replied that if it wasn't for Lady Biche, she wouldn't have gotten here, and thanked her. Cecilia noticed that it looked like the coronation ceremony was beginning. Jade appeared in the open doorway and walked past the people, straight to the throne. The priest announced that the new ruler of the Taranto Empire would be blessed in the name of the goddess Josis. The emperor's crown was placed on Jade's head, and then music played. Cecilia asked Lady Biche if all coronation ceremonies were so sparsely attended, to which she replied that she did not know, as it was the first time she had attended one. Usually the music creates a solemn atmosphere, like at a festival. Biche couldn't understand what the expression on Jade's face was carrying. However, indeed, whether the emperor who usurped the Trog was laughing or not, because that would make him even scarier. She recalled how, last night, his face transfixed with emotion, leave it to the emperor whether he would behave as before. Dupree summoned the goddess Cecilia and notified her that she was to greet His Majesty. Dupree noted that Biche was also expected. Biche thought that the new emperor wanted to meet with the saint, so since Bish was a frequent visitor, they considered her a priestess. Bish clarified why she had to go. Dupree awkwardly replied that the saint said she should go with her. At the same moment, Cecilia stood with a cute, begging face. Dupree apprised that the Emperor had also given his consent. "Your Highness the Emperor." Now Bisha needs to address Jade that way. She should practice. Someone announced that the saint and the temple priestess had arrived. They were greeted by Archduke Cartmel, who invited them to pass. Bish realized that this was the man she had seen in her father's study, and decided to clarify with Dupree in a whisper who the man was. Dupree replied that it was the Grand Duke. Cartmel noted that here they were, meeting again with Lady Emelian. Bish bowed to him and added that it was a great part for her to meet him, the Great Duke, and she also apologized for the disrespect she had shown at the last meeting. The Duke replied that it was fine and he deserved it. After all, it was worth it to get the invitation. The girl offered to come inside. Dupree mentally asked her how she could disrespect the Great Duke, and Cecilia thought of no one Lady Bish didn't know. Bishy was only here because she'd been asked. It was so strange for her to sit and talk to them. Suddenly someone's hands were placed on her shoulders. It turned out to be Emperor Jade, who told her to take a seat. Out of habit she brought up his name, but then she mumbled and addressed him as His Highness. Dupree was horrified. He asks that if that's how she wants to address him by his name, let her wait until they are alone. Jade kept urging the girl to sit down, to which she replied that she would sit down now and he would let it go. Even Duke Cartmel was shocked and numb. The Grand Duke shared that he was glad that the saint had appeared in the temple and the new emperor had ascended to the throne at the same time, for was it not a miracle, truly a manifestation of God's will? Michelle replied that there is no place more busy than the palace. Sometimes the will of the gods is inscrutable. Bish mentally urged Cartmel and Michelle to stop talking nonsense and get down to business. What is the point of talking around and around? Let them not talk off topic. If they concentrate, Bish can catch the essence. The Grand Duke thinks that the temple and the imperial family get along well, while the priest Michelle is not so optimistic and is interested in what the imperial family needs. That said, they don't give each other a hard time. Bichet also pointed out that if you think of it that way, today is the first time the main characters Jade and Cecilia met. In the original story, they were supposed to meet in the middle of the war, but now it's under different circumstances. She noted that the war was still going on in some places and looked toward Cartmel and Michelle. Bish didn't know what she was doing here. She decided to eat a cookie and there was a very loud crunch that caught the attention of the others. Bish became very embarrassed. She didn't understand why the cookie, she felt very sorry, and asked the others to please keep talking. Mentally, she added so they wouldn't pay attention to a minor character. Bish noticed that Jade was laughing, and she mentally called him a creep and told him to stop laughing. Cecilia announced that they had to go, and she thanked Lady Bish for being with them today. Dupree seriously told Bish to not go anywhere and make a mess. She better find the Marquis and get back home. Bish indignantly asked him, seriously, what did he know about her when she was the source of the trouble? Suddenly Benjamin appeared and drew Bish's attention. The girl noticed his coat. She didn't expect the uniform of an imperial knight to suit him so well. But the atmosphere changed abruptly, and Bish indignantly began to ask Benjamin that he knew where Jay was, and didn't he? That he was also aware of it. Benjamin started making excuses that he only found out yesterday. Michelle pointed out to Cecilia that the three were related, to which the girl replied that their love was so strong. Bish showed her twin brothers the gesture of cutting off their heads, and stated that they would see the two of them later, and she would wipe the hell out of them. Benjamin realized that if Bish found out that he had been following the Grand Duke since he was 17, and even took part in the rebellion, he would be finished. Dupree thought about how, isn't it obvious? She will beat the hell out of him not with a wooden block, but with a real sword. It was like this. Duke Cartmel unexpectedly summoned Benjamin the day he turned 17 and prepared him for the Imperial Cavalry exam. When Bish asked where Jade was, Benjamin rushed to the Grand Duke's residence to find out what was going on, but when he arrived, he only saw Jade calmly minding his own business in the hallway. What happened next? Meeting Jade, worrying about him, His mission to support him in the rebellion and help him become the new emperor was a big surprise. Bish stated that they call such things willful lies. Benjamin asked her to stop. If Jade was involved in the attack, Benjamin couldn't contact the family like he used to, and Dupree had always assumed that his brother was busy with his responsibilities and didn't have enough information to find out the exact reason why he was rarely in touch. Bish clarified whether they were really brothers, to which Dupree replied that if he hadn't heard from him, it didn't mean they weren't there at all. She asked how things were going in the Empire, whether the Night Squad was getting enough, whether the work was hard, and it appeared that Jade was now Benjamin's boss. However, if that were the case, he wouldn't be so tired. Benjamin looks good. Bish didn't understand why the atmosphere suddenly changed drastically. I think Benjamin's face twisted a little, or maybe it was just her imagination that they were having a bad relationship. Jade suddenly appeared and wondered if they were talking bad about him behind his back. Bish smiled and addressed Jade as her emperor, saying that he wasn't and that he looked fine. Jade asked the girl if she was free, if they could take a walk in the garden together. The girl was surprised at the suggestion and asked Jade if he was busy today, since it was the day he ascended to the throne. Jade replied that he always had time for a cup of tea with Bish. The boys held hands and walked away from the twin brothers. Dupree said indignantly, "Didn't they see them? They're invisible, maybe they should follow them." Benjamin asked his brother, "Didn't he see the love in their eyes? If they followed them, I might not have a headache." Bish was amazed by the garden and didn't realize if it was a garden or a forest. Jade noted that they could go and look around, but Bish replied that it was fine. She was fine here, then added that the palace had changed. There was gold leaf on the cake and candy, and the tea tasted very different. Jade shared that in addition to Empire tea, there are other varieties that come from other countries. Bish clarified if this variety is going east, to which Jade replied that yes, and if she liked it, he could give it to her to take with her. Bish asked how much it would cost, to which Jade wondered if she cared about his wallet. Bish noted that his childish habit hadn't gone anywhere. She was the only one who dared to command the emperor. Bish turned to Jade and decided to ask him what he thought of Cecilia. Bish clutched the hem of her dress, thinking that they might have fallen for each other at first sight. Jade clarified who Bish was talking about, however, and Bish reminded him of the girl they'd just recently been in the same room with. Jade apparently didn't know who she was. Bish remarked that Cecilia was beautiful, like a goddess, and he had no idea how kind she was. Bish went on to say about Cecilia that she also likes to read, and Bish even wondered if there were any books in the palace that would appeal to her, for she seems to like to eat both sweet and savoury things at the same time. Cecilia sees a cake on the horizon and rushes to eat it, especially the cheesecake. Jade asked Bisha if she liked sweet and salty things too. She replied that their tastes are similar, and they are very similar in general. Bish added that since Cecilia sleeps all the time, she always arrives late at the palace and may not show up for the early morning prayers, but otherwise she walks around with a sullen face. Jade clarified whether Bish has such habits. Jade asked if he was asking about sleep, if he was asking about sleep at all, if she was tortured by early rising, and if he was considering changing the palace's rising time. Jade asked if it was necessary, to which Bish replied brightly that it was a good idea. Suddenly Jade asked if that meant she'd be moving into the palace, then added that she'd have her favourite gilded desserts, he'd collect her favourite books, and she wouldn't have to worry about the rising time. She could sleep until noon. Jade asked the girl how she felt about living in the palace. Cecilia clarified if she would move into the palace. Michelle told her that it was not necessary to stay there for a long time. The emperor only needed moral support, so she would stay there for a while. The priests would also live in the palace, so she had nothing to worry about. After that, Michelle decided to ask Cecilia about her impressions of the new emperor. Cecily stated that she didn't like him. Bish didn't understand what he was saying. How could she leave home and move to the palace? Even though Jade is the emperor, but can he call someone to move into the palace as his home? Even though the palace is his home now. Here, Bish wondered if he might be lonely. He is alone in a huge palace. Does Jade miss his friends? She didn't even think of that since he has Benjamin with him. Dupree at this point clutched his chest, screaming his heart out, to which Benjamin told him to calm down. Dupree stated that surely Bish must be up to something again. Jade turned to Bish and stated that he knew what she was thinking, but it wasn't like that. She didn't understand what was wrong, if he was reading her mind, but afterward she stated that living in the palace was too much, but she would visit him often. Jade exhaled, and Bish decided to find out when Cecilia would move into the palace. Jade noted that he didn't know. However, the temple was ready, so it would be soon. Bish told him to be sure to be friendly and welcoming to her, and not to get mad at her. Jade clarified with Bish if she wanted more cookies. The girl was indignant, for she had asked him to listen to her carefully. He had not changed at all since he was 10. She mentally declared that he and Cecilia should fall in love soon, break his curse, and start living happily ever after. Jade noted that Bish had something on her cheek and wiped it off with his own finger, then remarked that she was still the same. Bish noted that his hands were no longer the gentle hands of a 10-year-old boy, but rather the scarred hands of a man, and his smile was more enchanting, but not at all like it had been as a child. She declared that he had grown up and blushed. Her little friend had become all grown up. How many days after the coronation, Cecilia moved into the palace? It seems that Duke Kartmioy immediately asked her to demonstrate her divine power. Perhaps this test was needed to see if Jade's curse could be broken. If Bish left things as they were, they should just fall in love and live with each other for the rest of their lives. However, Bish received a letter asking Cecilia to help her. Bish experienced déjà vu, as if she had seen this before. She had been confused by her tired appearance the last time they had met. Bish wondered if she should go and comfort Cecilia. Then she called Sophia and asked her to please prepare everything to go out. Cecilia declared that this place was hell on earth. Bish did not understand why she was suddenly so sad. Bish turned to Lady Cecilia, noting that she was looking a little drab, wondering if life in the palace was tiring. Cecilia began to sob, saying that she did not like it here at all. Every day the Duke uses her divine power for strange experiments, and the Emperor behaves coldly and is always silent. Bish has no idea how scared Cecilia is. Bish was shocked. Is Cecilia afraid of gentle Jade? And she told Cecilia that the Emperor is far from being an emotionless person. She did not understand what Lady Bish was saying, for Jade was so indifferent that his coldness pierced her soul with needles. Bish was amazed how one could compare a man to needles. Cecilia said she couldn't take it anymore. It was scary and boring and hard to breathe, and she had had enough. Bish realized she couldn't do that. Not only were they not in love, they weren't even close. Where was she going? Bish told her to calm down first and suggested they go for a walk. Cecilia shared that the Duke insists she use her divine powers because he's worried she'll forget what she's learned, and as luck would have it, no one else can use them. Bish sincerely didn't understand why the Duke would pick on an ordinary girl. Cecilia asks Bisha what she should do about the Emperor. She swears that if it weren't for divine powers, he would always be looking at her with his eyebrows furrowed. They have never once had a normal conversation. She has no patience for it, and she tells him what she thinks, and if this continues, her head will fly off her shoulders. Bish remarked that here's the lovey-dovey thing. She didn't understand why the hell they were fighting. Bish noted that she thought Cecilia was making things up. They were just still awkward to talk to each other, and the Emperor wasn't a bad person. Cecilia stated that she didn't want to get along with him. She would run away from the palace, and that was it. Bish sincerely didn't understand why the situation had turned out this way. Cecilia asked Bish if she realized how lonely it was in the huge palace. In the temple, the priest treated her with all the love, but here she was afraid. Bish suggested that she call the priests to live in the palace. Cecilia replied that she had asked, but he would not allow it. Even Michel with Dupré was forbidden. To her, he is bad, the worst in the whole world, an iceman and a jerk. Bish was shocked that Cecilia was calling Jade names. The reason priests are banned from the palace is because the imperial family doesn't want anyone to know about Jade's curse. Unexpectedly, Bish suggested that she talk to him herself. Cecilia said it was no use. Let her move in with her here. Bish was shocked, and didn't understand why things had turned out this way. Cecilia said that she could handle Bish. She was still uncomfortable with the servants and had no one to talk to, but the hardships of being in the palace were nothing to Bish. The Holy Maiden asked Bish if she was willing. Bish herself began to hesitate to answer, and Cecilia began to beg, to plead with her. Bish mentally asked Cecilia if she could let her go and how she would refuse, whereupon Bish said aloud that the palace was not a place where anyone could live. Cecilia reminded that she and the Emperor were childhood friends, and if she asked him, he would definitely allow it. Bish realised that was just crazy, then replied that they weren't really that close. Suddenly, Jade appeared next to them and heard Bish say that they weren't that close. The girls were shocked and frightened by his sudden appearance and screamed all over the garden. They asked him why he was here, how much he had heard. Jade smiled and replied that he didn't know. However, her answer might make her forget everything. Jade leaned against the bench and leaned over to Bish and asked her if she would move to the palace. Bish realised that he had heard absolutely everything, whether it would make things worse between them. Jade asked how many years of imprisonment they give for insulting the imperial family. Bish was shocked that he was threatening so openly. If she didn't move, he would force Cecilia to confess to defaming the imperial family. Bish asked His Majesty the Emperor to wait, saying that she can't do that. She will be constantly reprimanded for being in the palace where she doesn't belong, Jade clarified. And what was he in favour of her? Bish asked him mentally not to laugh. If he was so amused by the situation, what was he doing in the garden at this hour? Benjamin remarked that it's such a mess out there. It's time to get away. The others are standing in the distance. Cecilia began to whisper in Lady Bish's ear that Jade was acting intimidating and looked like a real villain, a cunning fox. Bish mentally asked indignantly if the two of them were always like this, what kind of love they had. It was a short walk to war. Bish stated that she understood, and since it was okay, she would move. Cecilia clapped and thanked her, and Jade said it was the right decision. Bish remarked that they looked like a couple of troublemakers, and how they had this sudden solidarity at a time like this. Then Jade turned to the Holy Maiden and informed her that it seemed the Grand Duke was looking for her. Bish was horrified when she realised that apparently Cecilia had escaped from her duties to meet her. Cecilia sadly replied that such a thing was not impossible, and she removed herself from the couple of Jade and Bish, saying that she had to go, after which she added to Lady Bish to come as soon as possible. She would wait for her by all means.